Yeah, I feel so good.
Ken Douglas.
I feel better seeing you. I feel better seeing you. You were.
Welcome to the February 12th, 2024 meeting of the Sandusky City Commission. We'll have an invocation offered by Commissioner Pajali, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Praise God. Lord, thank you for another day of life and the privilege to serve the people of Sandusky. Help us to listen and respect the opinions of all of those present, and give us the strength, courage, and wisdom to make sound decisions this evening. Amen.
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 I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Ms. Myers, will you call the roll?
Yes, Mr. President. Mr. Pajali.
Here.
Mr. Kuntz.
Here.
Mr. Crable.
Here.
Ms. Fargo. Here. Mr. Waddington.
Here.
Mr. Brady.
Here.
Mr. Murray.
Here.
This evening, we have a lot of guests this evening, but we have a couple of special guests from Perkins High School. I'd like to introduce ARCL Oglesby Riddle. If you'd stand, and I can embarrass you. And I'd like to introduce Wyatt Gilbert. Thank you. They both spent some time with me this afternoon talking about local government and how it works, or perhaps doesn't work sometimes. I hope that this part of their visit doesn't scare them completely out of considering public service. I expect all of you to be on your best behavior, I'll tell you that. Commissioners, you have before the minutes of our meeting of January 22nd, 2024. What's your pleasure?
Mr. Chairman,
Commissioner Waddington.
I'll move that we accept the minutes of the January 22nd meeting as presented.
Second.
Been a motion and a second discussion. Without objection, the motion will be approved, and hearing no objection, that motion is approved. Tonight we have two presentations for us. I'm going to move slightly out of order here because I can see we have a lot of guests regarding one of the presentations anyway, and I'm going to move that presentation to the front. That presentation is regarding streetscape. It's going to be conducted by our Chief Planner, Aaron Blair.
Thank you, Commission President Brady. Good evening. For the past 3 years, we have been talking with increasing levels of detail about the Columbus Avenue streetscape, and tonight I thank you for the opportunity to zoom out and talk about why this project is important to our community and for the continued revitalization of our city. First, I'd love to ask, how many of you in the past few years have been to Ohio Bike Week? Just a few? Bunch. What about Ironman, the Ironman competition, as a participant or observer? Most of the room? More than half? How about a Party at the Pier concert? Half the room? More than half? Took your kids ice skating at the winter couple kit? Yeah. Or a visit to the pier? Thank you. Thank you for participating. Planners use this term placemaking. What that essentially means is investment in high-quality public spaces and consistently programming those spaces so we have a reason to go back to them. It's also referred to as place-based economic development. When we invest in our public spaces, people have great experiences in them. We can create emotional connections with those places, and because we're having a great time when we're there, it strengthens our community because we see friends there, we see acquaintances, we build relationships, we bring our families, and we enjoy ourselves. Those experiences have measurable outcomes. When we invest in high-quality public space and consistent programming, people spend longer on a single trip because they have more places to go and visit. They make more repeat trips and bring people back with them in places they enjoy. They share more via word of mouth, they talk about those places, and share more on social media. For every dollar we spend on placemaking projects, we can expect a $10 to $15 return on private investment in the surrounding area. We can point to dozens of research, observational studies, and reporting on the outcomes and the measurable benefits of placemaking projects in high-quality public spaces. And this is not just true for a Columbus Avenue streetscape, it's true for other things in the pipeline, like the landing project, the Sandusky Bay Pathway, the skate park. All of those investments will have measurable outcomes on the surrounding properties and the places that they connect. And we don't have to, I mean, we can go read those studies, and I encourage you to if you'd like to, but we have our own experience with that in town, which is the revitalization, the transformation of the Jackson Street Pier, and the surrounding $100 million of private investment that we've seen since we embarked on that project. That was all part of a strategy for downtown. And why do we focus on downtown? Because it's critical to not only the city's economic health, but also the economic health of the region. Because there is the density of attractions and square footage and commercial space, downtown tends to outperform other areas of the cities and income tax generation and sales tax. It's a key residential and employment and small business growth area, even for people that don't live or work downtown. The placemaking and the attraction of people, of the character of the place, is an important talent and business generator. So how do we make sure that we get the measurable outcomes that we want when we're investing in downtown? We have a really good plan. And thank you, there's a number of you in the room and on the podium or at the table today that were supporters and participants in the downtown planning process. We adopted the downtown plan in February of 2021, and Columbus Avenue Streetscape is the first priority project to come out of that planning process. And that was really shaped with hundreds of people, and many of them in repeat conversations over the scope of this conversation. So from 2019 to 2021 in the downtown plan process, we engaged more than 800 people, the Columbus Avenue stakeholders in several rounds of engagement, various commission approvals. 21 to 2023, more than 500 people were engaged in that process, and that includes overall at least 4 city commission reviews and approvals of the Columbus Avenue streetscape as it's gone through these levels of detail. So let's take a look at the streetscape today. Columbus Avenue is not serving the businesses well. It's not serving our community well today. The streetscape is reaching its end of life. The pavers are sinking. The trees are reaching the end of life. They block the views of the storefronts and the signage. If you look at the architecture, some of the amazing businesses we have, the view of the water, Columbus Avenue is an outstanding, one-of-a-kind place. The streetscape itself is a low quality of place. The transformation of the streetscape with this project rebalances the roadway to create that high-quality public place that we're wanting to see those measurable outcomes. It has a number of enhancements to the pedestrian experience, including safety and accessibility improvements. And it provides us better day-to-day operations. It's our main street. And also new flexibility and opportunity to hold events. We've spoken with stakeholders from across all the different uses of the streetscape in order to make sure that we get to this design that's working well for everything we want it to do. A question we get is, why does it have such a hefty price tag? It's a few blocks, it's a lot of money. Short answer to that is it's an infrastructure project with a roadway project on top of that and a public space project on top of that. It's more than one thing. If you break that down even further, you can look at the full depth demolition. We're removing the 100-year-old brick roadway underneath to stabilize that roadway for the next 100 years. We're replacing the 80-year-old cast iron water line and doubling the water capacity with a 12-inch new line. We are full depth curb building face to building face, replacing everything, the roadway, the pavement, and having the two-way drive lanes and parking lanes, improving the side street connectivity. There's a number of safety and accessibility improvements, including wider sidewalks, fewer obstructions, the tabled intersections, which will make crossing the street feel like a level and easy experience. The curb heights are lower, so they're easy to step up onto and down from. It creates a linear park concept from Washington Park down to Shade Mile Under Plaza with native plantings, higher tree elevation. So you get that nice dappled shade and the sunshine, you get the wind break when it's cool outside, but you can see the signage and the entrances to the buildings on the street. And it has a number of those placemaking wow factors. The lights across the roadway with movable seating and kind of a parklet area in front of the garage. We get a lot of questions about parking. And you've heard the headline answer from me, which is downtown is a system. The downtown parking needs to function as a system. And the strength of downtown as a destination is its walkability and character. Parking spaces don't add a lot of character. Of course, we need them. We need people to be able to drive downtown, to find a parking space, to know where the parking spaces are and how long they're allowed to be in them. We have a responsibility to manage the inventory of our parking spaces. With more than 1,000 public spaces today, we have more than enough for the downtown to function on a day-to-day basis. And if it continues to get more popular, as we expect it will, then that parking inventory management, looking for other opportunities to increase parking, will absolutely be an important part of the strategy, and I look forward to working on that with you. The construction timeline, that's this next question I get. I see when I'm out and about all the time, people are like, when's Columbus Avenue happening? I hear the excitement. So we expect to bring this for permission from you to bid the project. And then we have to, of course, collect bids and then come back to you to award the project. In the meantime, once we have that contractor on board, that we can award the project, that's when we can have some critical conversations with all the building owners so they can expect when will things happen, and when we have that contractor that can really advise us on the really breakdown of that schedule. So we expect to allow select activities in August this year. We don't want to disrupt the end of season, but if there's anything we can do to get it started, we will. And if not, that's only by city staff, and Josh Schneider will be managing the construction process. And then in September, the fall, really start the construction for the majority of the construction to take place in fall, and then spring, and wrap up by spring of 2025. So again, I think every single point I made, we could have a 3-hour workshop on, if not a 2-day conference. But thanks again for the invitation to really zoom out and talk about why this project is important, and it's very exciting to be here with you at the table today.
I'm sure that commissioners have questions for you, Ms. Blair, but before we entertain those, I see a lot of folks in this room that I know they're here specifically for this project, and I would encourage them to come to the podium now, identify yourself, and give us your thoughts on the project. Don't be confused that this is not the public portion that pertain to agenda items. That's going to come later. But I want to deal with this project now, and in respect to everybody's time, let you have your say and get you in and get you out of here if that's your choice. You're certainly welcome to stay for the next 3 hours of this commission meeting, but if we can dispense with this, we'd like to hear your thoughts, everybody's thoughts that's here for this purpose. So line up.
Hello. My name is Gavin Longer. My address is 401 West Shoreline Drive, and I'm with North Coast Inns. Thank you for the opportunity to address the commission. I am here to express our support for the Columbus Ave streetscape. We are excited to develop a Hampton by Hilton hotel downtown Sandusky. One of the reasons we've decided to build this hotel is the city's master plan. As we prepare to make a significant investment into the downtown, we, along with other businesses, have made those decisions based off this plan. We feel it's important that the city remains a good partner to businesses and continues to show a commitment to the downtown master plan. Transformative projects like the Columbus Avenue are reasons we want to invest. My dad has shared with many of you how the Jackson Street Pier has inspired him and given him the confidence to invest in downtown Sandusky. The key priorities of that plan, along with the hotel, were the Columbus Avenue enhancements. Along with the State Theater renovation, we feel that all three of these projects together will create a vibrant, walkable district that will benefit the citizens of Sandusky, along with those who have invested in Sandusky. We encourage the Commission to support the Columbus Avenue project, along with other projects that support the already approved master plan. The sign of commitment to the master plan provides assurance to anyone that has or will invest in downtown that there is one unified and organized vision for the future of Sandusky. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Longer.
Good afternoon, Larry Fletcher, 13 Twin Oaks, Milan, Ohio. Thank you for the opportunity, President Brady, commissioners, everyone gathered here. So as well as being a resident of Erie County, as some of you know, I'm the director of Shores and Islands, Ohio, the destination marketing organization for the region. We have 2 welcome centers. One is in Port Clinton, and one is just a couple blocks to our north at 125 East Water Street. And I'll speak to you tonight on just from 2 perspectives. One is as that director of our regional destination marketing organization. And from that perspective, I'd be here making these comments if our welcome center was in Vermilion or in Huron or on Kelly's Island or any place else in this region. And from that perspective, the reason is that what is good for one community in the Shores and Islands region is good for other communities as well. For the greater region. And Aaron mentioned many of the reasons why this project is good for Sandusky. Projects like this, time and again, in communities here in our region and throughout the state and other parts of the country have proven to enhance communities and elevate the experience for the residents and visitors. So why is that good for the entire region? Because a project in one area in our region can serve as a catalyst for positive change in other communities. And the more of these elevated experiences that we have throughout the Shores and Islands region, the more that we have to promote, and the more chance for our visitors and residents have opportunities to enjoy these things and tell others about them. And then the greater the chance that Sandusky and this region can attract additional investment, businesses, people who want to live, work, and of course visit here. The other perspective I have on this project is as a representative of a downtown business that has, over the 3 years we've been operating at 125 East Water Street, we've realized a continual increase in people traveling through our doors and the associated opportunity to serve the public. And while the Welcome Center is just one component of our marketing efforts, that personal touch is very important to us. And last year, more than 14,000 people came through the doors at 125 East Water Street. That is more than twice what we tracked during 2016, which was the last year we operated from the location on Milan Road. The evidence points to this increase being due to pedestrian traffic. While the Milan Road location had many more vehicles going by it, they were going by it. Here we have people walking by us, or maybe on a bike. And with entrances on Water Street and on Shoreline Drive, we've had many more people coming into our Welcome Center. And when they come into our Welcome Center, then they learn about other things to see and do in downtown Sandusky, in the greater Sandusky region, and throughout the Shores and Islands area. That is why this project is transformational, not only from a regional perspective, but I believe also for downtown Sandusky. I'd like to add that our organization, should this project move forward before and during the construction process, we will be ready to serve as a resource for the businesses to let people know that we are open and ready to serve them. We've been doing that ever since the construction in Ottawa County started on State Route 2 and State Route 53 North, with signage, with public relations campaigns to let people know these businesses are open, you can still get to them, and by the way, here's what you're going to get to experience once this project is done. And we will do the same here in Sandusky. So thank you again for your time. On behalf of all of us at Shores and Islands, we're proud to be part of this community, and we look forward to continuing to benefit from its growth.
Thank you, Mr. Fletcher.
Thank you. Good evening. My name is Duff Milkey, 631 Wayne Street. I'm a resident of Sandusky, but tonight I'm here as chair of the board of the Greater Sandusky Partnership. which the Greater Sandusky Partnership is a business-led economic development organization interested in regional economic development and in particular Erie County and Sandusky development. We recently joined forces with ECADEC to provide an economy of scale there so that we could better serve the community. And as a private sector organization interested in economic development, we see a thriving downtown as both an asset to the city of Sandusky and an anchor for the entire region. It provides a context for growth and development. And as I've said at other times before in addressing this body, it continues to be an exciting time to be in this community. There's so many successes that we've had over the last 10 or 15 years, in large part with the leadership of this body. Things do not happen without that level of leadership, and we see this as another key project to keep that going and keep the development of our community moving along. When we look at the downtown investment, if you look at how downtown is currently being utilized, there's lots of what I would call sprouts of green. You look down, there's many of the businesses downtown that are already taking advantage of streetscape. There's lots of places, the Barra Vita Bistro, Daly's, Landmark, Crush, all utilize some form of outside dining or they take advantage of the outdoors and get people outside to enjoy that environment while they eat, drink, and talk with one another. The downtown investment has been incredible when you really think about it. And I'll just point out a few. There's a lot of entrepreneurs that started downtown. If you think back a long time ago, there weren't a ton of restaurants and businesses down here. There's a lot more today. That's why it's so exciting. That's why this is such an exciting project. But then when you look at the Cook Building, the Fike Building, the State Theater, all of them have had to overcome some sort of challenge that asks them, are you committed to progress? Are you committed to the growth and the development of the downtown? And thankfully for the whole community, they answered yes. They answered yes to those challenges. And so that is a true asset to this community and speaks a lot about the character of our community. And then as Aaron mentioned, the connective tissue that this would represent, I think, is so important. The city made the investment in the Mylander Plaza and the pier. And Washington Park has been long a staple of something that people come to Sandusky to see and enjoy, that the commission has decided through thick and thin to keep alive as a place to go. This would connect those assets. And so in closing, I would just say the GSP is supportive of this project because we believe it allows us as a community to capitalize on past and proven successes of investments in our community by the various parties. And thank you again for your leadership.
Thank you, Mr. Milkey.
Chris Parthmore, 111 East Madison Street. I am here as a downtown business owner, or downtown business representative, a community member, and also a member of the Downtown Sandusky Master Planning Steering Committee. When we met and formed that committee and started this whole plan for downtown, it was to build on the positive momentum of the Bicentennial Vision Plan. That Bicentennial Vision Plan was wonderfully executed, and it gave this community momentum that we carry on in the future now. This is the first piece of legislation from that downtown master plan to come before the committee. And I just wanted to come here and reiterate how important I think it is to continue that momentum that we've gathered over the past 10 years. Simply put, when you build a community for pedestrians, when you build it for people and not for vehicles, it increases foot traffic. I've never been anywhere in the world that the busiest street in a city isn't the pedestrian-only one. This doesn't quite go that far, but I think it's a great step in the right direction, building for people. I would urge your support for the Columbus Ave Streetscape project, and we look forward to the continued positive momentum in this community. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Michael Delahunt. I'm the president of the North Coast Young Professionals. I have a lot of notes here, and I'm kind of just going to go off the cuff. I moved back to this area from Cleveland because of all the development that we've seen in the last few years. And I am one of many young people who are choosing to make Sandusky their home. And we're really excited to see that. I'm here to express my organization's enthusiastic support for this project. As advocates of a group deeply invested in the well-being and development of our community, we believe that this initiative holds significant promise for enhancing the livability, safety, and vibrancy of our downtown neighborhood. A large apprehension of this project has been the elimination of parking spots. Going from personal experience, I'll say this is not a bad thing. Since I was 6 years old, my family and I have been traveling to Traverse City in both summer and spring. I've seen the developments of their downtown over the last 2 decades. Starting as a single street filled with rotating tenants and an ever-changing commercial space, the lack of parking created a larger downtown footprint. Visitors forced to park a block or two away from their destination increased foot traffic to otherwise unvisited streets and businesses. And this has only continued in the 2 decades since my first visit. And I'm happy to say that although I may not be able to park right in front of the one store that I need, the walk to and from my car always leads me to multiple stops at businesses that I have not planned on visiting otherwise. In conclusion, the North Coast Young Professionals wholeheartedly endorses this project and urge you to continue your support and advocacy for its implementation. We're confident that this endeavor will yield lasting benefits for our community and serve as a model for future urban development initiatives. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Dillahunt. Additional comments? Seeing no one stepping to the podium, I'll certainly open it up to commission questions for Ms. Blair. Oh, yes, sir.
My name is Tim Stuckey. I live at 1307 5th Street in the city of Sandusky. Born and raised here. I turned 77 this year. Not getting around like I used to. So that brings up a very interesting comment when I was listening to all these nice people talk about this downtown project. Going to refresh your memory a little bit going back. Remember that young lady that used to be riding around in her wheelchair and had her kid in the chair, and we had to do all this modification of all these curbs and gutters and everything for handicap access? I did, because she come down my street. Now, what is going to keep me from coming downtown? Handicap access. I'm soon to be going to a wheelchair. My wife just had back surgery and she is in one. I can't come down here. If you do this project, you're going to have all these people taking up all this space. Where's going to be the right of way for ADA to get into these stores? Where's going to be handicap parking in front of the store for the place you want to go see? Your purpose is not to have that anymore, the way this project's going. I think that you need to think about that. And the reason I say that is, every one of you up here, I believe, was here when that young lady was here. And it cost the city of Sandusky one lot of money. And they're still working on that project to creating the handicap access at the curbs and in and out of houses and businesses and stuff. If you're doing this project downtown, you better darn well give some serious thought of what I just said, because it ain't going to be me coming down here. It'll be the ADA.
Thank you, Mr. Stuckey. Any additional comments regarding streetscape? If not, commissioners, I'm sure that you have some questions for Ms. Blair. I thought you had questions for Ms. Blair, maybe not.
I'll go first. So, Aaron, it's a great, I've sat with you before in Colleen, and it's a beautiful project. And as I shared with my fellow commissioners and a lot of people in the room that it's been a hot topic this week, I've talked to a lot of people. The biggest concern is the parking. You brought that up. So I wanted you to maybe help the community understand, one of your points was, what does managing the parking look like? So I think that's one of the issues when I've talked to a lot of business owners, there's been no solution to the problem that we face. So could you help the community understand that?
Absolutely. Thank you for the question through the chair to Ms. Vargo. The best practice for on-street spots is about 15% of those spaces being open at any given time. So that's really what people tend to notice when they come to. They want a predictable spot. They want to know where to go. So the management would be most important to focus on turnover on the on-street spaces. So if we have today, for example, if we have employees of businesses parking in an on-street space for 8 or 10 hours, or we have an overnight guest that gets on the Jet Express and is parked on an on-street space for, overnight, then that bars all of those probably dozens of 30-minute, 15-minute trips that somebody could swing in and buy a dress or a piece of jewelry or a cup of coffee. So the management of the ongoing spaces is one of the most important things. We have 2-hour parking limits that are managed with varied results now. So I think that we as a group, as a staff and community need to figure out how to do that better. Another is the wayfinding. So people knowing where to go, where they're allowed to park, how to find those parking spaces. And that sometimes can start online when people are looking up, they're going to a show at the theater. What does their parking instructions and their driving instructions look like? What do the websites of the business communities show folks that they can come in? What's the Jet Express parking instructions look like? And do we have that central information online for people to know, okay, I'm going to Pelee Island, where do I queue up? How do I get my car on the boat? I'm going to Kelly's, I'm going to be there overnight, where am I allowed to park? So the wayfinding from when you start to plan your trip to when you get here and you're behind the wheel and finding those parking spaces is really important. So taking a look at the signage and the wayfinding is also part of that management.
At what point do we start that plan to go with this? Is it going to be coinciding? I mean, because I think that if it would alleviate a lot for people if there was a solution before you start digging up a street.
That's a great question. I have been just gently socializing this message throughout this design process of just like the immediate next step is going to be have a conversation about what that management plan looks like. So if all these, this project comes online in April of next year, I think we should be prepared to have something that's ready to hit go on May 1st.
Additional comments or questions, Commissioner?
Yes.
Commissioner Crable? Commissioner
Go
Combs?
ahead. Here you go. Yes, Aaron, thank you for the presentation. The gentleman raised an interesting question, Mr. Stuckey, and it was one that I didn't really think about as much, but it raised some other questions as well. One about, we rarely talk about what will this look like for those who are physically challenged? What will that look like when they're doing construction? Because some folks might need to get there, right? So that's one of the questions. Well, what will that look like? How will they be able to, basically get to some of these places that they generally were going to? The other question is related to businesses that might not even be represented at this meeting, right? Those businesses who, for whatever reason, because I haven't really heard anything about how long does it take to finish a specific section at a time. How will that affect the businesses of those who say, wait a minute, we're already struggling. So now you've got some construction down here, right? And now we're going to struggle even more. So that's a question I would need to have answered as well, right? I would need to know, like, how long will they be out of commission, especially a business that's struggling? Like I said, not all businesses are down here right now talking about this, right? So I would like to know what they think, and it's just something maybe I could have asked some questions on myself, but I'm wondering how much work was done in that particular area just to find out, how do you think that'll affect you? What did you tell them about how long this project will take for each section in front of each individual business? So those are questions that I would need answered. And I'm for development and for those kinds of things that they talked about, because I do believe that pedestrians really need to walk an area, right? You need to create some more open space. I get all of that, but I'm just trying to look at both sides of the issue. So if you could help me understand that and answer those questions.
Absolutely. Thank you, through the chair, to Commissioner Coons. So I heard a few questions in there, and I'll do my best to address each of them. So 2 of your questions are really focusing on what's happening during the construction process and what conversations have we had to talk about how that, of course, it's going to be a little painful when we're under construction. How are we going to manage that to make it the best we can? So one answer is the phasing that's in the construction documentation has one side of the roadway open at all times for vehicles and pedestrian access to every single business open at all times. Of course, there might be a couple hours here and there or half a day here or there where they might not have direct access to a front door. We will do our best. That's going to be like weekly communications are going to be important at that point. But from the scope of the construction timeline, it will always be open. So the communication will become really important. It'll look like asphalt temporary sidewalks on times where the underground work is done, but the overlying sidewalk isn't complete yet. So that's what some of that's going to look like. And again, those like weekly communications and sometimes day-to-day and hour-by-hour communications become really important. That gets easier to do once we have a contractor on board, when we can start working with the general contractor and their team, and they can tell us how they interpret the construction documentation and the phasing that our design team expected and what they think the reality of that is going to look like. And we can bring them, we'll have a meeting here and invite everybody to meet that contractor and the folks that they will have on the crew, so that, you know, they will be known. They'll be right at our front door too. We'll have the opportunity to ask them questions, and the business owners will all have the opportunity and access to them. So another is like the ADA, so that I think I answered the question of during the construction timeframe and the accessibility then. Once this project is complete, we expect a huge improvement in ADA accessibility. Today, there is a number of places where if you're in a wheelchair, you have the choice to run into a cafe table or run over a tree grate, because the tree grates and the outdoor dining spaces are so close to each other. There's a number of places where you cannot get through with a walker or a wheelchair. We will have about 10 more feet of space when this project is finished. So 12 feet of outdoor dining space, that's enough for 2 rows of cafe tables for folks to sit and enjoy themselves. 8 feet of sidewalk space that's uninterrupted up and down the roadway. Also, the intersection improvements, I mentioned tabling. That means they come up just a little bit. So when you're in a car, it's kind of a gentle up and down. It's not like a speed bump, but it's a gentle up and down. That'll slow traffic and help safety overall. But the crossing experience, so if you're in a wheelchair, walker, you know, even just little kids trying to get them, it'll feel much more of a level crossing experience, where today you're going up the crown, down the crown, up the ramp, onto the sidewalk. It'll feel much more of a level experience, which is a lot safer no matter what your mobility status is.
Okay, thank you.
Ms. Blair, my recollection, I think I know the answer to this, but I would like to hear it from your voice, and that is, speaking to the ADA end of this project, we're providing a curbless situation where people can go from one side of the street to the other side of the street and not have to cross a curb. Isn't that correct?
Yeah, we didn't go with a completely flush curb. So a flush curb would be even with no bump whatsoever. When you're parking a vehicle, it's easy to go up on a flush curb. So what we're going to have is about 3-inch curb. So you're going to get a little feedback on your tire and know when you're parking, and you're not likely to go up on the curb. There's also the light posts and the trees and everything to keep people in the roadway where the cars belong. But when you're actually stepping up and down, right now we have about a 9-inch curb, so it's a much, it's 3 times the step.
And can I hear your assurance that we will comply with every ADA law in the books? That's what cities, because of the case that Mr. Stuckey referenced, that's what cities like ours have to do.
Yes.
And we want to do that.
Yes, absolutely.
Good. Additional comments or questions? Commissioner Crable.
Mr. President, I have a variety of different questions, concerns. I'll just kind of go through them and take notes. You can answer them here. We can talk another time. Doesn't matter. Parking is the very first thing. It is a little disturbing to me, and I've had businesses, not downtown, not storefronts, but I certainly empathize with those who do. But it's kind of disturbing to me that it seems kind of a casual throwaway that, well, yeah, we're going to have fewer parking spaces, and people will just kind of need to learn to, park a block away or a block and a half away, or, maybe something will happen, with the hotel development that will ameliorate, some of this. It seems to me that first things first, and that's the people who are investing their money with the businesses, with the redevelopment of the buildings themselves. And that it seems to me that there are parking issues that need to be addressed before we start tearing everything up, knowing that we're going to have fewer parking spaces. One of the things that's curious to me, and only because I haven't heard, I don't think the information's been put out there as yet. I tend to be a fan of the hotel project, being developed. I've actually, for quite a number of years, been a fan of that concept, generally speaking. But I've heard so many different things about parking and whether it's just going to be hotel parking, whether it's going to be, are there going to be retail, is retail going to be offered in that same development? And will there be parking inside a deck or something that can access that additional demand for parking? Because we will be creating new demand for parking there. Whether there's that or it's just a restaurant or a bar or whatever it is, you're going to generate more demand for parking. And whether there's any public access to parking on that site. I think those are awfully good questions to know before we start turning dirt. So I would, and again, there's nothing against the hotel development whatsoever. Please don't anybody read that into what I said. I just think that there's more information that we need to know before we would ever get to shovels and dirt. One of the things that's been curious to me, and with some of the physical issues I've had recently, I haven't been able to probably research this to the degree that I might normally. I don't hear enthusiasm from the local businesses or the property owners, perhaps the State Theater, we've heard from them, thank you. But the private properties, the people who struggle every day to make enough sales to be able to turn the lights on the next day. I don't get enthusiasm from any of them. And they've said that they've been approached and asked, but they're kind of hesitant to express their concerns. That's kind of a telling thing to me, because you would think that if, as you said, there's a 15-to-1 return in terms of, private development and whatnot, that everybody'd be lined up, let's get going and I'll jump in, and on Saturdays I'm going to be out there, slinging concrete. And it just seems to be absent. I'm a little concerned, and you will hear more from me on other projects about this, but Michelle, from time to time, we talk about some of these things. I'm a little concerned that the city is looking at this project, that we're going to put some of our own reserves from a couple of different sources, but some of our own money on the table for this. And we're going to go out and we're going to bond the rest. We're going to borrow it. I'm one of those people who want to pay off my debt. I want to be out of debt. I don't want to be adding more debt. So that therein lies a concern for me. That may not be a concern that anybody can overcome other than me and my psychiatrist. I don't know. What's the time pressure here? Are we under a gun that this has to be done this year? Are we under a gun that it has to be done next year? What's that about? And I ask that in the context of some of us having just come out of a campaign to sit here, knowing very full well that one of the highest priorities this community has is to its neighborhoods. And I'm concerned that one of the very first things we're being asked to take a vote on is putting yet more money into the downtown and opening up the city to even more criticism from those who don't see the commitment being made to the neighborhoods that they would like to see. Do I understand that this project involves wider sidewalks than we currently have? I've never seen anybody run into somebody else. And I don't mean to be a smart aleck, though I kind of am. Why do we need wider sidewalks at the loss of parking spaces? And just speaking for some of my fellow Ohio drivers, I don't mind parallel parking. Find it kind of fun. Okay? I have a very narrow life, so you gotta take your fun where you get it. But there's a lot of people who just can't do it. And yet we're asking them to do it in order to patronize some of our businesses. I just don't see that as being a good idea. Again, why do we need wider sidewalks? Why did we need, and this is just another pet peeve, on Shoreline Drive, why did we have to have narrower lanes for cars? I think that was to slow traffic, if memory serves. But that was the best explanation that anybody gave me. But I just don't get the need for wider sidewalks when we've got whatever width they are now. Maybe our chief can tell us that we've had, 19 separate incidents where we've had bicyclists running into pedestrians, but I'm not sure that that's been the case. So at this point, I will stop, but I have quite a few concerns about the project.
There are, Mr. Commissioner Cribble, you posed several questions, and one of them that I would like to pick out, and I would turn to our finance director to provide some support for what I'm about to say, or maybe she could say it better. And that is your characterization that we are committing some of our reserves to do this, I think is totally inaccurate. What we are committing for the first 5 years until 2031 are dollars from a fund called Downtown Destination Development Funds. Those are not reserves. Those are dollars that we reap from the admissions tax, principally to Cedar Point. Those are dollars that are earmarked for exactly a project like we're looking at here tonight. And to add to that answer to that question, I will leapfrog to the neighborhoods. And that is, we are prohibited from taking $1 of those destination development funds or $1 out of that tip and spending it on the neighborhoods. I think prior commissions have prioritized neighborhoods And we're going to, and I believe this commission is going to continue to prioritize neighborhoods, as you will see, I think, later tonight. But to mix and match the two is not a fair mix or match. Those funds are specifically meant to serve improving a destination downtown, and a TIF is specifically meant to be spent on the 6-block area that's down there.
Yeah, no, that's fine. I appreciate the elucidation there.
Ms. Frieder, I have that right?
You do, Commission President. The only other thing that I would add is that there was reference to our debt. I would like it to be noted that we have zero debt liability beginning in 2027 in our general bond retirement fund. So as far as, debt funding and anything on that avenue, we've been conservative, and we are to the point where we have $0 in debt coming out of that fund in 2027.
And Mr. President, I'm well aware of what the debt retirement is. I've seen it, but again, it's me. I don't like to take on more debt. When I can avoid it, I don't want to do it.
Mr. Chairman?
Mr. Pajali?
Was, and I may be confused along the way, was the original financing plan to TIF this project totally? Was Destination Sandusky funding in the original financing structure?
My understanding is the original plan was always to use destination development money to get us to the point where the funds would be available.
Is that how you recall it?
Through the Commission President to Commissioner Pajali, so this has been going on for quite some time. So initially the thought was it was going to be 100% funded from the downtown TIF. But as the project developed and it became more expensive, we had to look at other avenues to make this project work.
And the reason I ask is because that's how I think it was originally proposed to me, that it would be paid for with the TIF. Just to comment, Aaron, you did a wonderful job with your presentation. You always do a nice job. This is a beautiful project, and I remember back when I was working for the city in a past life, 88, 89, they had a meeting much like this on downtown parking. And a gentleman named Steve Lochner got up and said a parking problem in the downtown is a great thing to have. But of course, back then, the downtown was a ghost town, so I don't know if he believed that was ever going to come to fruition. I guess I've heard the positive seems to have responded tonight, and that's a good thing. But the things I hear out on the street are parking and cost. Those two things I hear over and over from people out on the street. So that's what I wrestle with as we move forward with this vote on this project.
Additional comments, Commissioner?
Mr. Brady.
Commissioner Murray.
So a couple of thoughts, and there's a little bit of history that goes along with this. I remember a meeting like this, I don't remember how many years ago it was, 6, 7, something like that. We had a very angry crowd here. We were talking about the Jack Street Pier. And, I said at the time, this isn't a sporting contest. We're not going to yell. We're going to listen to each other respectfully. And we did. And we pleaded with the public at the time to listen to what the urban planners were saying, because they were saying something that was very important. And to listen to what all of us were concerned about, because they had good changes to make. And we did make a lot of changes, but we spent a lot of money. We're always concerned about spending money, but we got something for it. We got a treasure for the entire community. And it's a triumph of urban planning to see that you can change the fixed environment and you change the experiences people have in that area. This is the same thing. It's going to have the same result. I've been down this road a number of times, and I know that that's how this is going to turn out. This will increase business downtown to a tremendous degree. We don't know how much. But in so many things in life, we have to make our best estimate of whether this is good for the community as a whole, and then proceed, knowing that we'll never know every detail. But if we want to know every detail, we'll never take the next step. You'd never go to college. You'd never get married. You'd never have children. You'd never buy a home. It just doesn't work that way. We have sound people advising us. intelligent, experienced people advising us, and I think this is a plan that we should embrace. You know, I've heard for many years the argument about the neighborhoods versus economic development. It's a false choice. It's not a choice. We have to do both. And we always have to do both, because we can't afford to lift up our neighborhoods if we don't have the economic engine that's driving the city and generating the revenues. One of the most important people to speak was Mr. Delahunt. We are projected over the next number of decades to lose 20% of our population. We won't be able to keep businesses open. We won't be able to pay for basic services if we just continue to become an older community and a poorer community. We can't provide services for those very folks who need it the most. We need to drive economic development, and we need to make this an attractive place for young people in particular to come back to. That's what we've been doing over the last couple of years. That's the progress that we've been experiencing, and people like Mr. Delahunt and many others are testament to that. We have stabilized our population. We're no longer losing population, and we're becoming a destination of choice for a lot of people, but our work isn't done. There's more to be done. I started serving on the commission in 2006, and every single year and every single project we've talked about the parking problems that we feel that we have, or that some of our neighbors feel that we have. And you know, it's true that if we go forward with this project, some people are going to have to walk a little further. We were down visiting our daughter in Cincinnati last weekend, and we had two particular destinations that we were going to that required that we walk 9 or 10 blocks each way. No big deal. That was what we had to do in order to be able to get to these areas where there are all sorts of people, all sorts of activity, all sorts of excitement, and that was what was necessary, and we didn't think twice about it. On the bond funding, and I'll wrap up with this. One other point I want to make. On the parking issue, we did a parking study a number of years ago. And Ms. Blair, I would urge you to dust that off and share that with all of the commission. I haven't looked at it in a long time, but the thought was that as we increase the density of the activity downtown, we would activate additional rings of management of those areas. And there was definitely a way that we could do it. I don't recall all the details right now, but I think it'd be very helpful for the commission to see that, because it's always been a worry, it's always been a concern, and I've always felt that that study contained a lot of important insights in terms of how we address that. Regarding bond funding, I respect the desire to reduce personal debt, but there is a time when it's necessary to take on debt, to purchase a home, for example. That's incredibly important. And we would not want people to say, we're going to wait until we have all the cash and then buy a home. It's not a realistic way to proceed. And when we are talking about an improvement that will serve generations to come, all of those generations need to participate in funding it. That's what bond funding does. When we do it with streets, we do it with roads, we do it, I'm going to start with water, and we do it with sewer. We make investments that will serve the public for decades to come. And we usually never bond anything out more than 30 years, but we talk about pipes and plants that have lasted for 60, 70, 80, sometimes 100 years. Those are appropriate investments to make, and they should be bond funded. We shouldn't have to pay for all of it today, because generations unborn and children of people not born today, born in way far in the future, will benefit from this project. So I think it's appropriate in this kind of an investment to take on that debt. So thank you for the opportunity to address those thoughts. Share those thoughts.
Comments, Commissioner.
You know, Aaron, I just wanted to say one thing. Thank you.
Commissioner Varga.
Yes, sorry, President. And I understand where your, Commissioner Murray is coming from. The one thing I want to take us back to, and Mr. Longer, you made me really think about it. Thank you so much for your willing to invest in our community, and a lot of people are really excited about that. But you made a comment about the master plan makes you want to come in and be business partners with the community, and that's awesome. The one thing I don't want us to walk away from and forget about is that we have business partners here currently, and there's a lot of trepidation with them. And in speaking with several of them, not everyone's making $1 million every year in downtown Sandusky. And so there is that trepidation and concern for their business. So what I'm asking is that we look at that as well and make sure that we bring new partners with the old partners together. That's what I would like to see. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Margot. Additional comments, Commissioners?
Mr. President, if I might, I think maybe the parking study that Commissioner Murray is referring to is the one that was done by the Main Street Association. I remember that because it was on my watch many years ago. So
Yeah, don't recall.
it's very thorough. It was
There
well
is,
done.
thank you, Commissioner Cribb. There's a reason that legislation is not before us tonight. I pulled that legislation. It was designed to be before us tonight. But I felt that it was so critically important that every commissioner, new ones and existing ones, hear this presentation again, and that our friends in the audience, for or against this project, have an opportunity to voice their support or their concern about it. I'll share with you one of the last thoughts that I had on the project, and that is that I have unbelievable respect for the merchants in our city. Every one of them. They get up every day, they open a door, and they try to make a living in this city. Sometimes it's not too good of a living, is it? But I have to come to the conclusion, and I have come to the conclusion, that this downtown does not just belong to the merchants. It belongs, yes, to the merchants, but it belongs to every resident in this city. It belongs to the guy on Larchmont Drive. It belongs to the guy on 48th Street. It belongs to the guy on Wildman Street. It belongs to all of us. So I would encourage all of us to take that into consideration, that absolutely we have to prize and be respectful for our merchants, but we have to look at the big picture. You've got to look at who's using your downtown, who is going to use it in the future. If there are no other thoughts, I'll thank you for your presentation.
Thank you, Commissioner President Brady, and the commissioners.
We have, the next presentation we have is on the sewer and water fund update that will be delivered to us by our Director of Public Works, Aaron Klein.
So exciting to follow that with charts and graphs and numbers, huh? I'll wait a minute if that's okay.
Well, this thins the herd. This thins the herd.
It's usually that way. You don't get many people make it to the end. I've asked for permission to leave in the middle myself, and it's been denied.
You all have
That's
to
what I
stay.
hope you have.
You all have to stay. Don't think about leaving.
By the way, I don't mean to upset anybody, but I'm going to.
All right, Aaron, you have the floor.
Okay, so
You know what I do every day, don't
we were asked a couple months ago to start looking into the utility funds, the sewer and water funds in particular. So we got together, city manager, finance director, and I have several more slides. There's graphs, there's charts, there's numbers. It could be overwhelming. We could have had another 40 or 50 slides in here, but we tried to pare it down and just make sure that we could give you guys an overview of exactly where the sewer and water funds are sitting today. So back in 2015 was when we did a rate increase. That was shortly after I got here, and we did 7 years at the time. At that time, we were basically doing a rate study on the water side, and then the county would do a rate study on the water side, and then we'd go back and forth and back and forth. We'd look at the wholesale rate, we'd look at the residential rate, and then we'd make a decision moving forward. And that was not a very good setup because we were spending $20,000, $25,000 a year apiece doing that. So as we move forward, we created a spreadsheet that we could look at and start analyzing it on a regular basis. And what we noticed was that the projections looked really, really good in 2015, 16, all the way through 2019. And then when COVID hit in 2020, we started seeing some fluctuations in some things, and it was really hard to make those predictions and to understand exactly what was going on. So because of uncertainties with hotels, with tourism, with restaurants shutting down and opening up, manufacturing, there was just so much going on. It was very difficult for us to make a good understanding and prediction on what those revenues were going to be. That being said, the expenses somewhat needed to stay the same. We can't shrink the size of our water plant. We can't reduce the size of the water mains. We can't lay off 3/4 of our staff. They still need to operate the plants. What we did do was push some of our projects back. We still had to move forward with Perkins Avenue, with Venice Road, those types of projects, the high rate treatment. So we wanted to make sure that we still progressed as much as we could and met those commitments. So this slide will show us where the fund balances were. Like I said, back in 2015 was when we started those rate increases. So you could see from 14 to 15, there was a huge drop off. That was predicted in those rate increases. Then through 21 or through 19, you could really see somewhat of an increase or at least a stabilization of those balances. On all of these slides, the sewer will be in green and the water will be in blue. And then you can also see in 2020 through 22, it was just like chaos, like things were going up, things were going down, and things were moving around, and it was somewhat difficult to predict. So moving to the revenue side, this one shows the city water, the county water, the city sewer, and the county sewer. What you can see on this one is that the revenues increased, as you would expect when you do a rate increase from 2015 to 2021, the revenues were increasing, but then around that 2019, 2020 really is when those big decreases came in because people were, things were shutting down and we just couldn't get to that point. One of the differences I would like to point out is the difference between the city and the county agreements between water and sewer. On the sewer side, the county has a rate and they have a capital expense. So that's why we wanted to show it the way that it's set up on here. And what you'll see in 2022 on the bottom on the county sewer, there was a large increase there. That was because there was a large capital payment to the city. So that wasn't necessarily that rates changed. In fact, rates for the county have stayed almost the same for decades. It's the capital expenses that we bring back in. Now on the water side, when the city rate goes up, the county rate goes up, there's not a capital expense associated with it. It's just when we decide our rate is needed to increase, then theirs would increase as well. This shows the projections from the original rate studies back in 2014 and 15. And what you can see, if you're looking at 2016 through 2018, 2019, that the sewer projection in the dark green compared to the actual sewer revenues really stayed about where it needed to be. Those lines follow the exact same slope on the way up. On the water side, really from 16, 18, the actuals were slightly below the projections, but we made do with pushing projects back, making sure that we were fiscally responsible and making ends meet, as you could see on the previous slide with the fund balances. But those large fluctuations between 2020 and 2022 really made it difficult. Now, again, those dark blue and dark green numbers are the projections based in 2015. Those were not the annual projections that we do at the budgeting time. This is the usage slide, and I think the most important point here is that trend line that's on here that shows that the water use and therefore the sewer use has gradually decreased over the last 10 years. We've tried to figure out exactly why that is. We've tried to get into detail. We've looked at the top users. We've looked across the board and dove into the numbers. We can't find one thing that sticks out as to this went out of business or that went out of business. There might be something like the YMCA or something along those lines, but it wasn't big enough to see a decrease almost every single year. Okay, so now we'll get into the expenses a little bit. And the way that the budget is really broken down is we look at the O&M, then we have the debt service, and this takes in those, and then we also have the capital on top of that. Though 4 of those lines on there will reflect the operation and maintenance. And then the last one, that orange line, is going to show the debt service. And what you can see on this slide, this is the water expenses. What you can see on here is that the wages and fringes, the personnel, that red line on the top, has somewhat stayed the same. This is even with health care costs increasing, wages percent increases for cost of living raises and those types of things. Staffing levels have stayed pretty regular. The biggest increases, as you can see on here, are really through the contractual services and the supplies and materials. Those are the accounts that we use mostly in our sewer and water plants and in our sewer maintenance and water distribution divisions, where they're buying materials for main breaks. They might have chemicals, they might have all the different operational things, but those are where the largest increases that you can see. One thing I would like to point out as well on that debt service, it has gone up, and to the point made earlier, one of the things that we've been very diligent about is making sure that there's projects, for example, Perkins Avenue, that was something that was a can kicked down the road for 20 years that we were doing now, and we had to time that so that we didn't have a dramatic increase in debt service. And then getting $5.5 million of grant really is going to help projects out like that. So we also have a lot of those projects in the mid-2000s, especially on the sewer side, are rolling off in 2027. So these numbers only go through 2023, I believe. But in 2027, a lot of that old debt reaches its 20 years, and a lot of it will fall off around that time. Here is the sewer expenses. You can see similar trends with wages and fringes staying relatively the same. And again, a lot of the debt service, like I said before, is included in there, and some of it rolls off over the next few years. So breaking these down even further, here's the 4 different funding accounts that really come out of the water fund. You'll have customer accounting, Big Island, water distribution, and administrative support. And you can see that those numbers also have stayed relatively the same. This is not employee numbers, exact full-time employees. This is really the amount of money that is allocated to each one of those accounts. And it has been pretty constant. And you'll see a similar thing for the sewer side. That one number in man, I need glasses. That one number in 2022 on the sewer, on the top one, those are retirements. So you'll see a spike when somebody retires and we have a large payout, and then it'll come back down to that normal number. Chemical costs. These costs, I wanted to show this. These costs are very reflective of what our operation supplies and materials, contractual services, they're very indicative of that. Now, most of these numbers are for our water plant. The last 2 on there are for our wastewater treatment plant. And between 2018 and 2022, the chemical cost increases have actually gone up over $750,000 combined at the 2 places, with most of that being at the water plant. So as we move forward, we obviously need to take all this into account and look at exactly where we're going and how those funds are sitting. That's what we're here for today. So the next step was to actually look at what would happen with the water fund and the sewer fund if we had no increases, if we had no adjustments to the rates. And this is the next 8 years. with no rate adjustments. And obviously, you can see that this leads into a fund balance problem. What that orange line is that's the target. When we go through our analysis, that's our target based on 25% reserves, based on those sewer and water no rate increases. So those revenues are constant all the way across. And what you can see is that those numbers are continually going down. In addition, this has no increase for future EPA requirements, lead service lines, other things like that. This is for current conditions, for current requirements. And I've also incorporated a small amount for capital improvements, $600,000 this year, and then $1 million to $1.5 million remaining for the other times. But one thing I do want to point out is, and this next slide will be coming up a little bit later, but I wanted to point out this number here in the middle, because our water rates currently are one of the lowest around. And that's something that we're very proud of, and we want to make sure that we keep that rate as low as possible. And like I said, I'll bring that up in a little bit. On the sewer side, we're doing a little bit better. You can see on the orange, again, that's the target fund balance. And the green is the projected fund balance with no increase. So we're doing okay for the next few years, but then we're going to dramatically decrease. Again, that's with a 25% reserve. And it also does not consider the fact that we are going to be going into negotiations with the EPA for our long-term control plan. And those numbers, when I talk about the capital numbers on here on these last two slides, these numbers are included in the capital improvement plan that will be coming at the next meeting for your guys' consideration. So here's really a breakdown of the history of the last several decades of rate increases on the sewer and the water side. And what you'll see in the gray is those zeros where there were no rate increases. Right after there were no increases, both sewer and water fund had dramatic increases, 35s, 30s, 25s, for several years, and then a few years of 3s and then zeros again, and then we had to do a dramatic increase. The goal is never to do those dramatic increases, but kind of have the smaller increases incrementally as you go. But, in 2021, that's when people were really struggling financially, really struggling. We didn't want to come back to commission. We didn't know what the projections were. We didn't know what the revenues were, those types of things. So, with people struggling, trying to make ends meet, trying to make their payments to keep their house, those years were years that we were hoping that we would be able to push right through and move forward. So now, as we're looking through what we feel, what staff felt as we were going through this as recommended increases, I have a spreadsheet that I look at, like I said, and we can adjust the numbers 10%, 5%, 50%, whatever we want it to be on those numbers. And what we tried to do is, knowing that the water fund was in a little more dire straits now and the sewer fund was sitting a little bit better, we're trying to keep those numbers lower. And what that does is, because the water rate is only around $22 and the sewer rate already is $50-ish, that increase, that percent increase, is really reflected a lot more lower on the water side than it would be on the sewer side. So as you can see, what we're recommending for an increase would be 15%, or just over $3 on the water side for the next 2 years, and then for the following 5 years, 3% to each fund. And it's really, as you can see on that bottom line, the total monthly increase we're trying to keep below $4, and as we move forward, it would only be a couple dollars a month. So with those recommended increases, this is what the funds look like. Again, that blue line, like we said, the water fund is in a little more pain right now, so it's not going to shoot right back up. We still have a couple years that we're going to struggle to make sure that our year-end revenues are going to be acceptable. We'll make sure that that works. And that target fund balance, this number here on the orange, it's just somewhat constant across here. That number reflects a 25% reserve. If you're looking at a 15% reserve, for example, that's about 2.5 million. So that falls more in line down in this range here. So that's something that would be a goal depending on where commission feels our reserve should be, 15, 20, 25, 30, wherever those need to be. And then on the sewer side, like I said, we're doing a little better right now. So no increases in the first 2 years, and then 3% as we move forward. And again, this target fund balance of 4.9 is 25% reserve. And if you want to reduce that reserve, you could get 15% would be down around 4 million. So we would be doing okay for several years. So what does that really mean to the resident? For 1 CCF, which is the minimum water purchase, is $24.57. That's for the first CCF. And as you can see, this is an effective date of June 1st. That can be effective whenever commission makes it effective. But this chart just shows June 1st for now. But the residential rate is shown on this slide. I wish I could increase the size of that for you. But okay, so on that fifth column where it says old total amount, the 7333, you can see on the new total amount, it only goes up $3. That 5 CCF is the state average. That's the average of what most residents would use throughout the state. That really falls in line with about where the city would be based on this chart. And this chart, like I said, is the one that I showed a little bit earlier. Earlier we had $22 for the water. This shows the 25, and we're still in a decent range. The state average is over $80, so we'd still be well below that state average. And remember, these are current numbers. These are only 2024. Some of these other entities also have increases on the books for the next few years. And it's really, one thing I do want to point out that is really, really difficult to compare, because not everybody has a wastewater treatment plant. Not everybody has a long-term control plant or a older sewer system or older water system or older water plant. You know, those types of things. So it's really difficult to compare communities, but I think it's also important to make sure that we are comparing, especially with communities that are similar to ours, which is what we tried to pull, and communities that are close to ours, whether they're similar or not, just so we have a good understanding of what it looks like in the area. And with that, I am done. I know that we've spoken to many of you already, but if anybody has any more questions.
Mr. Chairman.
Questions or comments, Commissioner Kushawati?
Mr. Chairman, I got a couple. The contract still goes through 2055, and they had it when, I've been around a little bit and had no sense, a lot of this stuff. The master meters, there was a thing where the county thought we had leaks, we had to check. I had heard nothing about that, so that's still good? Like Oakland Cemetery going into the county, we're still good there? Okay. And then they were supposed to buy 1,850,000 CCFs set forth in the section, and then the county, are they still buying the same amount? Because at one time, I'm sure you know, they were going to sell to Bellevue, and they were going to sell to Norwalk, you know, we heard all them stories.
Yes.
Sell more water, so are they using less then too?
Yes, no, so what you can see on the slide that I have up here, and I should have pointed this out earlier, that light blue line is the city's revenue from the county for the rate that they're paying. And you can see that in 2016, when that agreement was re-signed, that took that 1.855 million CCF into consideration. And you can see that they're buying about the same amount every year. One of the things that agreement also did was it established a very, very low rate for anything above that 1.85 so that they could go out and sell to other communities and those types of things. So our hope when we were looking at this, and you can see the dark the projections that we had, our hope was that we were going to be able to bring in the revenues from the Bellevues, from other communities through those sales of other bulk water purchases, and that hasn't happened to the extent that we had hoped.
So what's the anticipation? You think it's going to level off then here in the county? Or do you have any?
I'm hoping that it goes up, and we would love to have those continued conversations to see if we can figure out a way to get more bulk water to rural water and everybody else.
Like Mr. Murray, you were on the commission a long time ago. Wasn't there a lot of talks, we're going to sell to Norwalk, Bellevue, everybody and their brother, everybody's starving for water. I even think Route 6 heading to Fremont was looked at.
May I address Mr. Waddington?
Mr. Murray?
Yes, that was our hope. And just to provide a little bit of context there, we'd had a lot of battles, as Mr. Klein pointed out, and we'd say, well, this is the study, this is the rate we think it ought to be. The county would hire their own folks, and they'd say, this is the rate it ought to be. We ended up with more litigation than we should have, and a lot of disagreements, and, there were a lot of finger pointing, I'll put it in a nice way, a lot of finger pointing going on about, oh, you City of Sandusky, you're using your water fund to, for your park, and you're making the county pay for that, or you're using it for a road, and you're making the county pay for that. So we said, no, that's not the case. You can't prove it. It's not true. But we said, okay, give you a better deal. We'll go to a flat rate. We'll agree on what the rate is, and we're not going to do any percentage of anything. This is the price. County wanted it. They said, let's not be involved in litigation anymore. Let's just set a fixed price. And we've lived with that ever since very well. And so if there's a little bump in our price, there's a little bump in their price automatically. That's the deal they wanted. That's the one we still have. It's a good deal. I think you point out something that's very important, Mr. Klein, and that is water usage keeps going down. And although you didn't say it tonight, I think I've heard you say it on other occasions, and I read widely about the issues that cities across Ohio and the entire country have about water and sewer rates, and I'm glad to see ours is so low. Thank goodness your team does a great job of keeping those prices down. One of the lowest cost provider, frankly, for water, one of the lowest or the lowest cost provider around. But the usage keeps going down, and our costs go up. And we don't have a lot of variable costs. Yeah, we have a little bit of we use a little bit of extra electricity and some extra chemicals, and those have gotten expensive. But we're basically looking at taking that same amount of expenses, which has grown. We've all seen what inflation has been, and we're trying to divide those into a smaller number of gallons. Yeah, nothing else happens, we're going to have a rate increase. So that's some of the history, Mr. Waddington. I want to flesh some of that out.
Some little battles.
Yeah, little.
Additional comments or questions, Commissioner?
Did have one other point.
Commissioner Murray?
And if I stall long enough, I'll remember what it was. Really big issue. What happens if we do nothing?
That's a big issue.
Ms. Reeder, what happens if we do nothing?
So through the commission president.
I don't like this process, by the way. In 2015, we had just passed issue 8. We had a new city manager, and Mr. Klein tapped on my shoulder and said, we haven't had rate increases for 13 years. We got to do something. I said, what? We haven't had rate increases for 13 years? He goes, yep, we got to do something. And those increases were a lot bigger than the ones we're looking at now. But we're facing the same abyss then that we're facing now. And Ms. Reeder, could you please explain the abyss?
So the water fund, as Aaron explained in this presentation, is concerning. But we all don't take it lightly. We don't want to do large increases. We don't want to do anything more than we absolutely have to. So this presented that we would be looking at a rate increase effective June 1st. We would probably need additional funds in the water fund by July 1st of this year. What that means is that we would come back in front of this body and ask for an advance of funds. As long as we have funds available in the general fund, we can make an advance of funds from the general fund to the water fund to make that balance in the water fund be a positive balance and no longer a negative balance. Mr. Murray, his comment to us has been, what happens when our water fund is in the negative, what happens? So there's, the state can come in for fiscal watch, fiscal emergency when you're looking at your fund balances. We will definitely do not want to be in that situation. It's nothing that we would ever take lightly, but we have the availability in our general fund that we could subsidize the water fund for a short period of time. It is nothing that we want to do for a long period of time, but that would get us through to where the rate would hopefully be in effect again, the rate increase for 2025. We'd be in a better position going forward in 2025.
Mr. Brady, let me follow up. Yeah, so excellent accounting explanation, but if I can translate that to English, what you're saying is that we would be asking the citizens of Sandusky to subsidize the water for the other users in Erie County.
That is correct.
Okay, thank you.
And Ms. Clear, to be clear, even if we implement Mr. Klein's suggestion, this year, we still lose $25,000. Did I read that graph?
That was the projection, and it's hard. It's hard, to know exactly what our costs would be, but yes, that's what it looks like at the moment.
I don't mind the 25,000. When I roll that graph out to 2031, I'm looking at $16 million. That's a lot of money. To do nothing is not a great option.
Absolutely.
Okay. Additional comments, Commissioners? Mr. Klein, thank you for your presentation. Legislation, we'll ask that you provide us with legislation, and this commission will debate that at a future meeting. Next on our agenda is a public hearing, which is a continuation of the public hearing on the rezoning of some parcels on Cleveland Road on January the 8th of 2024 that was paused until we could muster a supermajority of commissioners to consider that legislation. Ms. Blair, you have the floor again.
Thank you, Commission President Brady. Again, this is a continuation of the public hearing that is for an application for amendment to the zoning map for 2068, 2056, 2054, 2050 Cleveland Road, and a vacant lot in between those, in between 2056 and 2068 Cleveland Road. Parcel numbers are available on the screen there and in your communication for this. The Cleveland Road is on the left here. You can see our zoning map. So that's one of those parcels is currently zoned residential 2-family, and the remainder of those parcels is currently zoned R160, single-family residential. Across the street on Cleveland Road, you'll see the blue, that is roadside business zoning, and you'll see that R160 is the bulk of the neighborhood zoning behind these parcels. Here's a few photos looking eastward from 2050 Cleveland Road and looking westward from 2050 Cleveland Road, just so you can get a little bit of a picture of the character of those parcels. The staff report for this, as Planning Commission heard it on May 24th, 2023, included a recommendation to deny the application to rezone these parcels based on the moratorium that was being put in place on any parcel asked to be rezoned for the purpose of use of transient rental. We also outlined in the staff report that you could make an argument. The comprehensive plan points us to increase our ability to host visitors through increased hospitality, and you could also make a very compelling argument to preserve our housing stock for long-term residents, and we've seen how important that is through the recently released housing study and Firelands Forward. Ultimately, the Planning Commission's decision to deny this request to rezone was based on, in their conversation that was discussion at the table, the preservation of long-term housing, the protection of the stability of the residential neighborhood, including these parcels and the residential neighborhood that is adjacent to these parcels, and the availability of property for transient rental use in other districts. And that is what they were discussing at the table when they made the motion and recommended that this rezoning be denied. So that's just some background context that I promised to bring to you today. And of course, this is a public hearing, so anyone that's in the audience that would like to speak on this.
Correct. This is a public hearing, and we'll entertain comments and questions from both the public and from Commission. Anyone in the public wishing to speak on this issue? if you'll please identify yourself and share with us your comments.
May it please this honorable commission, my name is Dan McGookie. 225 Meg Street is my law office, better known as the building to the south of the Bait House Brewery. And I'm a resident of 1205 Cedar Point Road, lifelong resident of the city of Sandusky. I have to say that I'd like to think that it was with due respect to the sewer and water presentation, I thought it was well done. I'd like to think it was that presentation that caused half the crowd to clear out rather than my coming up to talk. But let me dispel a myth here that I think may be overhanging the room here right now. Transient rental, we all know, is a loaded term. It's been a loaded term for well over a year. And the concern is, and I understand and I appreciate the concern as far as the inventory, the stock of long-term rental housing in Sandusky. And it's a valid point. And I'm not here to challenge that point. But what I am here to say, first of all, is that I believe the red herring is that by allowing this change in zoning to roadside business to allow transient rental in this one block on south of Cleveland Road, across, I might add, from every property across the street is blue, and let's see here, if I may, if you could show me. I'm no good at technology, so I had a few. Every property across the street from these homes is zoned roadside business. Okay, thank you. Okay. Okay, first of all, going back to the Planning Commission report, I have to take a little exception to what happened at the Planning Commission and what Aaron said. In the report, it says that Alec drew up and did a good job in doing the way I read it. And if you look on page, scroll down here. Okay, on page 6 of the report, which you have up on your screens, it goes through the factors in deciding in the ordinances that are pertinent to the decision that were before the decision of the Planning Commission. And it does say here that, where is it? Okay, it notes that the moratorium takes effect on June 7th. It was, I think, May 8th is when the moratorium was passed by the City Commission. By the way, we filed the application for the zoning amendment, I believe it was on April 26th, so it was several weeks before the moratorium was even voted on.
Mr. Chairman, we don't need to relitigate this point. I think it's agreed that the city made a mistake and we moved prematurely, and so that's why we're redoing it, and we're here tonight.
Okay.
So.
Isn't that why we're here today?
No, it's not why we're here today. Why we're here today is because after the moratorium was passed, we appealed, and we had received a letter from the prior law director that the City Commission was not going to take this up, would be normal practice. So we appealed to the Common Pleas Court. The Common Pleas Court decided that, no, we have a right to this hearing, and here we are.
Yes.
Okay, so that's, just so you know. So we're back where should have been about 6 months ago. And so it's an appeal from the Planning Commission, but I only point out that this, our application preceded the vote on the moratorium, and I think that's important here.
I think we all understand that.
Right, okay. Well, good. Let's proceed then to the, to Exhibit 2A. Okay. Sorry. These are pictures of the house that is at issue, or the one house. This was, the first picture was before. I'm sorry that they're turned around. I guess if you want to turn your head around, then we can see it better. This is what Mr. Blake McGorry has done with the one house. By the way, the McGorry family has had roots in this neighborhood since the 1940s, okay? What they like to do, they have 3 of the 5 properties on the block. They would like to turn them, the 3 properties that they own, one's a vacant piece of land. They'd like to put a house there and turn it into an Airbnb. Now, but Mr. Blake McGorry, and he can speak to this following me, and I don't want to hold the commission up. I'll just get right to the point. You guys understand where we're at this point, what brings us here. But Mr. McGorry has spent the better part of $200,000 in improving this house. Now, they have, like I said, they have roots that go back to the end of this neighborhood into the 40s. So, and the McGorry family has been in Sandusky for well over 100 years. They have the JMAC business. So we're talking about good community members here that are seeking to do something that I would propose to this commission is consistent with everything else, as found in the Planning Commission report, by the way, consistent with the comprehensive zoning plan of the city. So we're not here I think what I invite you to do is look at this application and this specific set of facts, as I believe you're required to do under the law. If you can determine that there's a good government grounds for turning down this application on this property, these properties, then that's I guess your decision. But I would suggest to you that there is no good governmental reason. And that leads me to the next this picture shows that, by the way, behind the house, we've got parking. All of the other requirements are met. So there is to this house, or these houses being used as transient rentals. All the other qualifications are met. Okay, as I was saying before, this is an overhead aerial. Every property that's blue is roadside business. Right across the street's all roadside business. Okay, this picture shows, again, I'm sorry it's sideways, but it shows that the historical background of the property. There is, this goes back to 1953, a flyover, and I mean, it was kind of it was truly a neighborhood, I guess you could best describe it back then. But compare that to today, and we all know, and I'll have some slides that have to do with a roundabout, and the current, the current Cedar Point roadway that we know now, what it looks like, and it is truly a commercial corridor. Next, I would point you to this is ordinance 112906, and okay, on page 3, where it describes tourist rooms, I don't know if you can see that, you have it on your monitors. This property, these properties, being on the state route, Route 2, would qualify under a tourist room, for a tourist room rental. Now, if you look to E1, it's provided that it provides the, sorry. Okay, thank you. It provides that the exterior character of the dwelling is not changed. We're not proposing to change the exterior character of the dwelling. We're not going to have an advertising sign, and we are required to have off-street parking. So all of the requirements are met. It's on the state route. It meets those other criteria for these properties to rent tourist rooms. I would ask the commission, the members of this commission, to ask themselves, what is the difference? These criteria obviously are meant, they're directed toward the outside character of the building. They're directed to not changing the character of the neighborhood. And those are the same considerations that are at play in considering whether to do a transient rental. The exact same, we're not changing the outside. People, I'm being a little bit overstating the position here, or the point, but people coming in occasionally with their suitcases in hand, getting out of the car, whether it's a tourist room or if it's a vacation rental, transient rental, there is no difference. I mean, there's no difference at all. So if this property could be a B&B, why can't it be an Airbnb? Okay. Lastly, I have a couple of items here with regard to the roundabout and the Cleveland Road corridor. I'm not going to go through this. Basically, I'm just presenting these items to the commission for consideration, but here's the point. We all know that the city is going to be spending hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars in the construction of the roundabout at the intersection of Cleveland Road and at Cedar Point, which is just 2 blocks from these houses. The reason that is happening is because of the increased traffic along Cleveland Road, obviously. This is a commercial corridor, okay? I don't think anyone here can deny that. And we're not, this is where I go back to what I said at the beginning, this is not an attack on the integrity of neighborhoods in Sandusky. It's instead consistent with the zoning plan, and I would submit to the commission that there's no good reason why this should be denied. And I'd like to have Blake McGorry, Ms. McGorry, say a few things too.
Mr. McGoogie, excuse me just a minute, Mr. McGorry. I had a question regarding your presentation, or your logic anyway. In your slide just previous to this, you wanted to draw the conclusion that a house renting for 3 rooms would be consistent with exactly what Mr. McGorry is doing. Doesn't that provision talk about a resident family?
Yes, it
does.
does.
So Mr. McGorry is going to live in this house while he rents these rooms?
No, he's not.
So it really isn't the same.
I'm saying that for the purposes of the considerations that in the statute, in the ordinance, that whether to allow a tourist rental, the same considerations apply for the Airbnb. So there's no good reason. I'm sorry, my throat has gotten dry, but there's no good reason for you to say, or it's allowed under the ordinance to say that you can use it as an Airbnb or as a B&B, but you can't use it as an Airbnb. You're right in the sense that
the residents got to live there. That's a little different the way I see it. Maybe I don't see it right.
Well, here's what I'm trying to do, Commissioner Brady. Trying to draw an analogy. If you're a neighbor and to 2068 Cleveland Road, and you have this house that's being rented, you don't know whether Mr. McGorry is living there or he's not. That's the point I'm trying to make. But you're right in the sense that under the tourist room, it requires the owner to live there. Do you see what I'm saying? Or
Yes.
Maybe I don't, maybe not. Maybe
I do see what you're saying. Mr. McGorry, go ahead. Sorry for interrupting you, but I thought it good to clarify that.
Okay.
Okay, I started this project with my son. I thought, well, we could make some income and work together. I see that we have a baseball field that's just been built further down in Cedar Point, perfect location. Already have hotels, other Airbnbs down further down on the same side. Well, this would be a good spot. Also, I look at it, and I know you have a corridor downtown, but a lot of people have kids. Do they really want to take them downtown where the drinking is? What would be the harm of putting it out closer to where they're actually going, Cedar Point and the baseball field, which is pretty much said after we got done with our presentation before. A week later, they put in the paper, they opened up one that held 32 people, which was only 10 houses down. What's the difference? It just seems. And when I was growing up, the Newman House, which I bought, I knew them when I was young. Behind it, there's a house that's got, I think it still has it's like a boarding house. Still has the doors there. Whether they're still using it as one or not, I don't know. Also, my grandma's house is a duplex next to it. The house next to that used to rent the back garage used to be as a rental for people going to Cedar Point. They don't do it now because they're older. They're not going to change anything. There's only one person lives there. Newman's house, nobody lived there for like 10 years. So I'm not taking anybody out of a house because nobody lived there. So that's all I could say.
Well,
Mr. Murray.
Can I say one more thing?
Well, it's up to you.
Mr. McGookie. Two attorneys.
Right, thank you. There is no one here, I would dare say, well, maybe there's a few equals, but no one more so cares more about the welfare of Sandusky than I do, okay? I've been a lifelong resident, I'm 71, I wouldn't, and by the way, thank you to this commission for all of the good work that you've done, that you have provided me with in the way of the Bait House Brewery, my law office. Thank you for all of those things. I would not be here advocating for the McGorrys if I didn't feel strongly about this. There is no reason that this shouldn't go through. I mean, it is relevant here to the fact that we filed our application before the city passed its moratorium, and so I would respectfully request. I'd be happy to take any questions, but I would respectfully request that you reverse the decision of the Planning Commission. And by the way, that was a 2-2 vote. And Mr. Pajali was there. He deferred. And Pete McGorry abstained for obvious reasons. So now that there was a 2-2 vote, so we lost. So we have to have a supermajority. And I would ask that the city, and by the way, I understand you're going to table this matter for a couple of weeks and come back and then vote, as I understand that.
I don't believe that is the case.
No, there's going to be 2 readings. They'll take a vote tonight.
Oh, okay.
But that won't pass, whatever it is. There'll be a second reading.
That
for final
legislation is on our agenda.
Right.
Okay. Okay.
Mr. Murray, did you have a comment?
Mr. Begori, you've got the best counsel you could possibly have on this issue. Mr. Cookie is an old friend, and there's nobody in the city of Sandusky who would argue this issue better for you. I will say that the discussion that you and Mr. Brady had on the issue of really an accessory dwelling kind of thing is what you're getting very close to. And I think that is the reason the statute, or the ordinance, I should say, distinguishes that setting where it is the resident himself or herself who's renting rooms in his or her house. The cop is on the beat, and that's why I've always been supportive of this, of accessory dwelling legislation. We haven't adopted that in the city of Sandusky, something I'd still like to look at some point because I think it accomplishes the best of all worlds, but that's for another day. I have a feeling, and correct me if I'm wrong, please, that this is something that we're a little bit of a way station, and there may be some additional litigation forthcoming. No objection to that whatsoever. But what I'm trying to understand is, let's assume this commission did not override the planning commission by a supermajority. What is the standard for review by a court if it were to go to that level? I mean, if you can answer that, or Mr. Hastings can answer that. I didn't ask either one of you in advance, so I'm sorry I put you both on the spot.
Well,
it's an arbitrary and capricious standard.
Okay, thank you.
In English, what does that mean for the rest of us? In electrical contractor terms, what does that mean?
For the chair directly, arbitrary capricious means that the common pleas court is not supposed to substitute its judgment for this body, but if it feels that it acted contrary to law or arbitrarily and capriciously, it can reverse.
I would add another layer to that with excuse me, I've got a very dry throat, so I'm having a hard time talking tonight, but I would add another layer of consideration to answer, and a very good question, I'm glad you asked that. It's when we appeal, like in all appeals, being the appellant, we have the burden to overturn this commission's decision. However, and this is critical, the city has to, like any government authority passing at whatever level, whether it's city, state, federal, but in this case, obviously the city, you have to have a reasonable basis, an articulable basis to support your decision. So what I'm saying to you is, with regard to this neighborhood, these 5 houses on this block, you have to be able to articulate a reason that enforcement of this of not allowing the rezoning serves a governmental purpose. Okay, if it meets all other criteria, that it's consistent with the comprehensive zoning plan, and it meets every other government criteria. There's plenty of parking, et cetera, et cetera. But you still then have to, if it meets all those things, and you have to tell the court, essentially, what it is, what purpose are you serving by enforcing, by not allowing the transient rental, by enforcing the restriction. Otherwise, the court will strike it down. I mean, if there's no reason other than we have a moratorium in place, I would suggest to this commission, that's not good enough. I mean, with regard to the facts on the ground of this situation, you have to state a reason for not allowing the transient rental. And there is, and that's the reason Mr. Murray pointed out, that's the reason I brought up the tourist room. If we qualify for a tourist room, what's the difference to the neighbor whether or not Mr. McGorry is living in the house? The neighbors don't know whether he's living in the house. There's no change in the neighborhood characteristics. This is a commercial corridor. the city's spending, hundreds of thousands of dollars to upgrade this. There's no reason. I would ask if someone could point out a reason to enforce this restriction on this group of houses.
Mr. Hastings, you had something to add?
Yeah, no, I just wanted the record clear that neither the Planning Commission nor this commission is planning to make the decision based solely on the moratorium. Again, this application, which we concede, was first received prior to the moratorium becoming effective, and therefore, under constitutional law, it can't operate ex post facto, and we are going to look at the matter on its merits. But I do believe that Mr. Murray answered the question.
And I think we all understand that the moratorium has nothing to do with this. We've already pled that case and lost that, but it does have to do with the change in zoning, and that's all it has to do with.
May I correct the record?
Okay. Murray?
I don't think the city is funding the roundabout. That's ODOT. And so it's 100% funded by ODOT. We don't have any choice, just to correct that. Didn't want the public to get confused about that.
Mr. Klein, I can see that you're concerned about that.
Yes, it's 95.5.
95.5. That's why I looked at you to provide me assurance.
Can't believe you don't know that stuff.
I forgot
I'm trying to find the language in the Planning Commission report. You folks have got it in front of you, but that was the reason why at least the staff recommended against approval, was because of the moratorium. And this is where I started saying I didn't make my point to what Aaron was saying. I think that the Planning Commission punted on this. They just deferred to you because of the moratorium. So here we're caught in a circle.
Yeah, Mr. Mookie, I'm convinced, and I'm trying to convince you and Mr. McGrory that we're not making a decision based on the moratorium.
Okay. No, I thank you.
Commissioner Kuntz, you had a question?
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir.
Quickly, Mr. McGookie, I appreciate your passion for this particular issue, but as one of the new city commissioners, and I'd like some clarification, right? I'd like to be educated, and Mr. Hastings, you'll probably be able to provide this for me. I hear talk about a bed and breakfast. Am I correct? A bed and breakfast requires that a person is there, but you can rent a couple of rooms, but you're there. Is that true?
That's true.
Okay. And so then I've heard a question come from that related to the owner. How would we not know that they're there, right? And one of the things, I always try to put myself in the shoes of the residents. And I'm always passionate about those who actually apply for something like this in an area that's already zoned for that. The people who know me, they know that. But my answer to that question as a resident, if somebody begins to rent that out, an individual, the owner's not there, then individuals come in and either trash the place, party, begin to make noise that the neighbors don't want, then we'll know the owner's not there. Then we'll be able to say, wait a minute, what's going on? And so when I see the neighbor the next day, I'm going to say, Hal, what's going on over at your spot, man? You're partying a lot more often than usual, and I want to know what's going on. So just to answer your question, and it's one that was really framed kind of in deception, right? So that's problematic for me too, right? It's framed in this idea of deception, right? We would know based upon whether the owner was doing this the way it needed to be done, and then potentially there's a problem. Now the owner has to deal with that, and so does the city. So do the residents, right? And so I need clarity on that, right? It's not about the moratorium, but then there's another issue. The issue is whether or not those individuals who are residents apply for an Airbnb or to have an Airbnb in an area. Didn't we have areas that were zoned already for Airbnbs, right? So when you begin to talk about rezoning, right, it's not about a moratorium. So educate me, explain it to me, Mr. Hastings, am I wrong? Give me a little more clarification about that.
Through the chair, no, you're not.
Yes, I'm sorry, through the chair, yes.
Said you're not wrong.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
There's Airbnbs on the same side of the street. So what's the difference if no one's there? They call the police. If I was home and I made the noise, they call the police on me too.
I would, if I may.
No one's there.
If I may. In 2017, I think it was, that the city passed the overlay district, which pretty much converted Meg Street, which is where I'm at, all the way down to Monroe, allowed for Airbnb. And in the legislation, the reason for the legislation was to be able to improve the neighborhood. So I disagree, I think, to some extent. I understand your point, Mr. Commissioner, but I disagree, the idea of having it an Airbnb is all of a sudden going to turn it into a big, party house, because that's inconsistent with the city's own finding to allow the overlay district up and down Meg Street, which is where I'm at. And the other thing I wanted to point out is that as far as and the reason, by the way, the city passed that, they wanted to have the neighborhoods improved. They wanted to have people spend money, which is exactly what Mr. McGorry did, to spend a lot of money on improving this house. The other thing is, I would dare say, I've never even stayed in an Airbnb myself, to tell you the truth, but they have very strict restrictions. I mean, people are there for a short term, and then if they commit acts, if they do damage to the house, they're going to be kicked off the Airbnb list, or there are repercussions. So Airbnb homes are better maintained than just regular rental homes, or I would say even owner-occupied homes, because if you don't keep the home up to a certain level, you're not going to get any customers. So I would say the restrictions are greater, and you're going to have a higher quality, property. Now, I'm not here to advocate, like I said at the beginning, that I'm not here to challenge the moratorium, but we've all agreed it's not applicable here. I might add too, by the way, even though the commission is now recognizing that the moratorium is not applicable, we spent 6 months debating with the former city council, on that very point, which led us to file an appeal. So the city's position up until just the last few weeks has been that the moratorium was applicable to this situation, and we weren't even allowed to come to the commission and to present our case until just now.
Well, you're here now, that's for sure.
Listen,
I'll ask for additional comments from Commissioner Crable.
Yeah, just real quick, and this is kind of an itch that I'd like to try to get scratched here. The indication was in your comments that you've invested $200,000 thus far, give or take, in these properties. I'm not unfamiliar with that process myself. But my question goes to this. Was there a conversation with the city prior to your making those investments about the appropriateness of doing what you intend to do? In other words, converting this to a transient rental?
Right, no.
So you just made the investment?
I didn't know you had to do this. Okay, I have friends who have Airbnbs, but this was in such a great location. I mean, we're right next to Cedar Point. We're right next to the baseball field. And it's just a beautiful spot.
I was just curious about.
And there's other Airbnbs there. And now that you know that. I mean, so.
Additional comments or questions, Commissioners? Now to turn to the public. Any comments or questions from the public? This is a public hearing. If not, I will declare this public hearing closed. Thank you. Any residents with comments regarding tonight's agenda, please step to the podium and share with us your name and address and your agenda comments, please. I would ask you to be brief. 3 minutes.
I'm going to try to do. Tim Schwalinger, 362 Sheffield Way. Make sure you get a hold of the Guinness Book of World Records for the World Records longest city commission meeting, please.
What a distinction.
The first item is item number B on the consent, which is the approval for a deduct from the 2023 CDBG Street Rehabilitation Project. Just curious why we did not use that deduct for applying those funds to additional streets to be done under 2023. I think we've done that in the past where if there was a deduct, we just did a few more streets.
Which item was that, Mr.?
That would be item B on the consent agenda.
Okay.
Item number D, which is again under the consent agenda, which is the acceptance of 3 parcels into the land bank. It mentions that there's going to be $27,000 in change not collected through property taxes with this transaction. And I thought in the past there have been a couple of situations where the delinquent property taxes actually went on the to the new property owner once that property is bought. I may be wrong. The other item is item F. Again, on the consent agenda is the contract for refuse and recycling for Republic Services. This appears to be an $80,000 increase over last year. And I do understand that we did advertise for in the newspaper and maybe sent out letters to all other companies that do recycling and trash removal. I don't know how we can get that under control into the future, but that appears to be going to be a done deal. Under item G, which again on the consent agenda would be transportation services for Kalahari Resort for the Sandusky Transit System. That's $75,000 for this year. I'd like to know how that compares monetarily wise to past contracts with Kalahari. And finally, under the regular agenda, which is item number 2, for the strategic plan, which is $79,000 to the architecture. Based on the supporting documents, it looks like there may not be any public input meetings, live meetings with the public to get the public's input on that. It looks like we're just going to rely on a survey. And again, if I'm wrong, please correct me. Let me know if there's going to be some actual public input sessions here or elsewhere to get the public's input for those who may not have the internet or Facebook or whatever. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Schwager.
I agree with you. It's a long meeting. Tim Stuckey, 1307 Fifth Street. As I have talked to various commissioners before I even sat down here today, on the consent agenda A, I wish that to be brought to the regular agenda and address the following issues. Number 1, years ago, the Sandusky Register and also me commuting with the EPA got a map back from the EPA that says we were all green on the map because of lead pipes. Now, that was the whole city. The purpose of this discussion today is, on your agenda, first then during the planning commission or during that open, where they had that special meeting. You know, the one with the downtown. You had on there one of the things they were going to address the lead pipes in a description in that wording. Now, this new area that you plan on doing on the west end or southwest end or wherever that is you're going to, I believe the following. Number 1, 3 doors down from me, 1223 and another one, they had lead pipes removed from their house within the last couple, 2-3 years. I was, what the heck were they doing? They're down there digging the road up, yanked out a piece of pipe, must have been 12 feet long. Anyhow, all these meters you're going to be putting in, The EPA had a consent decree on you guys years ago about doing something about these lead pipes. And we know they're there because the EPA tells me you guys had to send a list to them of where they're at by your people in the plumbing or wherever. You had to make a list and advise them where they were. So you already know where they're at. The thing is,
Mr. Stuckey, Mr.
one
Hastings,
thing,
I just want to ask Mr. Hastings, how is Mr. Stuckey doing on time?
He's right there.
Okay, if you can wrap it up.
okay, thank you. The thing is, you're going to be opening these hoses for these water meters. You have a great opportunity of time that when they pull that meter out of there, they're going to know they got a lead pipe runs to that main. I somewhat demand for the residents of the city of Sandusky, being we pay a nice water bill, that they address those issues and all the people that have this pipe. Now, this lead stuff was tied to the kids not learning well. They had a problem with the lead affects their mind or whatever. So I like to see you guys discuss, I want to see this discussed at this table in agenda. Thank you.
You got it, thank you. Next.
Mr. Chairman.
Commissioner
In the
White.
event to save a little time, could Mr. Stuckey maybe follow up with Mr. Klein? He could go over the maps. Sitting in this chair is too long. I agree.
I think we're compelled to have a discussion on this issue as it's taken from the consent agenda.
All right.
But I'm sure that Mr. Klein
pizza.
will find a way to have a one-on-one at some point also. Yes, ma'am.
Abby Fry, 303 East Washington Street. And I am here tonight to thank you for your support for the All Wheels Park. I have been involved with the design of the new park and am excited about the benefits it'll have for the community. This new park will provide a safe year-round gathering place for both children and adults. I think it's important to have somewhere that is accessible for youth and adults in the area to pursue an active lifestyle, regardless of their economic background. The park will also provide a place to be part of the community for youth who are unable or uninterested in pursuing organized team sports. It promotes the acquisition of social skills such as cooperation, communication, and civic responsibility. I've seen the positive impact it has had on my own children and their friends. In addition to the benefits the park will have for residents using it on a regular basis, it will also be an asset to downtown businesses. A high-quality park like this one will attract visitors from across the state and beyond. I have taken my children on many trips to skate parks across the country. Most of the time, this involves spending money on hotels, restaurants, and other activities in places that we've visited solely to go to those parks. I've met many other people at these parks who do the same. The new Sandusky All Wheels Park would be comparable to many other destination parks and draw lots of visitors to the area. I'm really looking forward to seeing the completion of this project, and thank you again for your support.
Thanks for your comments. Any additional comments? If not, we will attempt to answer most, if not all, those questions as that legislation has come before us. Commissioners, you have before you several communications from staff recommending various pieces of legislation. Can I have a motion to accept those communications?
So moved. Second.
A motion and a second discussion. Without objection, motion be approved. Hearing no objection, that motion is approved. Commissioners, we have 8 items on the consent agenda this evening. We will be moving, may I have I guess I need a motion to remove item A to the regular agenda.
So moved. Second.
Maybe I don't need a motion. Do I need a motion?
You don't need a
I don't think I
motion.
need a motion.
Any one member of the commission can remove.
I guess I just did that.
Yeah.
Great job. Ms. Mars, you present the consent agenda, less item A.
Yes, Mr. President. Item B, approval of change order number 1 and final for 2023 CDBG Street Rehabilitation Project with Erie Blacktop. Item C, approval of encroachment license for Family Health Services at 149 East Water. Item D, accepting 3 parcels into the land bank. Item E, permission to submit application for Safe Routes to School grant program. Item F, awarding a contract for refuge and recycling to Republic Services. Item G, approval of transportation services contract with Kalahari Resorts. Item H, authorization of payment for Sandusky Police Department annual subscription costs to Lexipol.
Commissioners, having heard these ordinances and resolutions, how do you wish to proceed?
Mr. Chairman,
Commissioner Waddington.
I make a motion to accept items B through H to the consent agenda items and declaring that all ordinances and or resolutions presented to the City Commission shall take effect in accordance with the sections reflected in accordance with Section 13 and 14 of the City Charter.
Second.
Been a motion and a second discussion. We have had several questions, starting with item B. Mr. Snyder, is he still with us or has he left the building?
He's gone.
Mr. Klein, perhaps you can shed some light on answering that question.
Yes, the first and probably the most significant answer to that question is being that this is CDBG federally funded, it follows different restrictions and guidelines than local funding, one of which is it has to go through proper environmental reviews, and that's usually several months, so it's not easy to just add a street to a CDBG project. But we have confirmed with the community development personnel that we are going to add that amount of money to this year's project when we get to it.
Thank you, Mr. Klein. We had a question on item D regarding the $27,166. Would Debbie, I see you looking like you might have the answer to that.
Through Commission President Brady to Mr. Schwanger, the land bank is accepting these parcels. 1520 and 1522 Hayes Ave they were offered as a gift of deed, and the largest part of that delinquency is a demolition that's been assessed to the taxes. And then 1730 Putnam is going through a tax foreclosure. So there is actually an active case on that one. So, you know, it's nothing we can do. It's going to be a judgment probably that those taxes be removed. That is also through a demolition as well.
Good. Thanks. Thank you very much.
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Murray.
Question for Mr. Hastings. I'm sorry I didn't ask this earlier. May I abstain on particular items in my vote, or do I have to abstain from everything now that we've got a consent agenda?
You can identify what you want to abstain from.
Item F, there was a question regarding refuse and recycling, and I know we've had that discussion with Mr. Klein today, although I know that Mr. Whirling's name is on this legislation. Mr. Klein, I think the explanation that you gave Mr. Murray and I today is probably appropriate to share the history. I think you may even have in front of you the history of how that cost has escalated and how we have very little way to control that.
Yes, through the Commission President. I do not have the numbers in front of me. I know Victor had prepared them.
Excellent.
But they have escalated significantly. I recall when I first got here, we were getting paid for recycling by Foltz and Sons, and then shortly after that, it was a net zero through the recycling program. That was in 2024 through 2017, and then charges started coming in because it was no longer profitable for recycling companies to recycle most of the materials. Some of the materials like cardboard, things like that are still profitable, but the costs have gone up. $46,000 in 2018, $59,000 in 2019, and they continue to creep up on an annual basis. I'm sorry, that's the total. The recycling is $30,000 in 2018, and then in 22 it went to $92,000, and it's continued to go up to $120 this year.
I find that frustration in that number and in that bidding process. It is true, is it not, that when we advertise for bids, we only get one respondent, and does not provide for a very competitive environment.
Yes, Mr. President, it's very difficult because there aren't that many recycling facilities, and Republic operates the facility out of Oberlin. We've tried for years to get other recycling companies to come in, whether it was to bid on the refuse collection or the recycling, but the amount of equipment that they would have to purchase and then the hauling of the recyclings to a different facility. Obviously, if Republic is competing with them, they probably won't give them a great price to take the recycling. So it's not it hasn't been cost effective for anybody else to come in at this point.
Thank you, Mr. Klein. Ms. Mars, you called
Mr. Chairman, can I take item G for that last one for Kalahari? So basically, 2 years ago, Kalahari was buying tickets for their employees, and it was going into a fair contract. We are able to use that dollar for dollar. So last year, we approached Kalahari. They paid $71,000-ish for a contract, which benefits the city way more than the process they were using before. We asked them for more money this year. They gave us $75,000. So that was the agreement with Kalahari.
Thank you, Mr. Orsi. Ms. Mars, you call the roll on that, on the motion, please.
Yes, Mr. President. Mr. Pajali?
Yes.
Mr. Coons?
Yes.
Mr. Crable?
Yes.
Ms. Spargo?
Yes.
Mr. Waddington?
Yes.
Mr. Brady?
Yes.
Mr. Murray?
Abstain on items B and C, yes as to all other items.
Now on the ordinances and resolutions.
Mr. Pajali?
Yes.
Mr. Coons?
Yes.
Mr. Crable?
Yes.
Ms. Spargo?
Yes.
Mr. Waddington?
Yes.
Mr. Brady?
Yes.
Mr. Murray?
Abstain as to items B and C, yes on all others.
Those ordinances and resolutions are passed. We'll turn to our regular agenda. Ms. Mars, if you present what is now the first item, which would be item A from the consent agenda.
It is requested an ordinance be passed authorizing and directing the city manager to expend funds to Corin Main LP of Ashland, Ohio for the purchase of materials and parts for improvements and repairs to water service infrastructure in calendar year 2024 and declaring that this ordinance shall take immediate effect in accordance with Section 14 of the city charter.
Commissioners, having heard this ordinance, what is your pleasure?
Mr. Chairman.
Murray.
Move for the adoption of this ordinance pursuant to Section 14 of the city's charter.
Second.
Been a motion and a second. Mr. Klein would rather timely request, because I think we've had this discussion as early as around noon today regarding lead pipes and the unbelievable cost that dealing with that. I wonder if you would share with us your thoughts on why we cannot sandwich this into that legislation.
I mean, you don't want the 30-minute answer to
No.
that? Okay.
Give me the Reader's Digest version.
Okay. So the regulations for lead pipe have been constantly changing over the last several years. Right now, the city is given the responsibility to not only submit a plan sometime this year to the EPA to incorporate replacement of lead pipes and identifying all the lead pipes, but the previous document that was submitted identified areas that were most likely lead pipes and areas that we knew that were lead pipes. For example, housing developments in the 80s and 90s, that was post-lead pipes, so that was post-lead. So we have a lot of information. We're still going through a lot of cards. We're still going through a lot of historical information. The requirement that we have right now is that if we encounter lead pipes on a project or something along those lines, then we have to go through the process of replacing it up to the meter pit. We don't have to replace the lead pipes from the meter pit to the house, but that's something that the EPA is contemplating changing. We don't have access from the property owners. The meter pits are usually near the right-of-way line, so we have access to go in, switch out these meters. This really helps out our crews with time. When they don't have to go and read every single meter and walk all of them, they can drive by, and then the meters get read that way. But as far as replacing those lead pipes, we're very aware. We take these samples on an annual basis through our system. They're constantly below the thresholds that are allowable by EPA. And, you know, our water distribution and water treatment folks are very, very proud of that. We do not have any lead in the public side of the water mains. The lead would be, if it is anywhere, it's on that private side that is from the meter pit or from the main to the house. And currently, that is not the city's responsibility to replace, but those are the discussions that EPA is having internally about how we're going to move forward. That being said, if we do move forward with a project of that magnitude, if it ever gets to that point, it could be $10 million a year to replace all the lead lines throughout the city for, who knows, 30, 40 years. So it's not a small project to replace all the lead lines, and that would be also dealing with every property owner getting on their property. Some of them might only be a couple hundred or a couple $1,000s. Some of them, if you have to tear up a driveway all along their house and get in through the back, those types of things. I'll tell you what, as we move forward with the MacArthur Park Churchwell project and we're relocating and bringing all those laterals out to the front, we're doing as best a job as we can on all of our projects to eliminate that possibility of lead lines. And that project, when we pull those lines out to the front, we will be doing the same.
Mr. Chairman.
Comments or questions?
If I may. So a couple things that are really important to note. One, we test, on a sample basis, we test in residential properties. Those, if there are lead pipes there, it's going through those lead pipes. The problem that we've all read about that in Flint, Michigan, is they change the chemical makeup. What happens with lead pipes is they develop a kind of rust, they oxidize, and then that protects the user from exposure to the lead. The problem, we have safe water in Sandusky. You test it every year, it's safe. The problem we have with lead exposure is still lead paint. That's where it's getting, that's also expensive, incredibly important, but the water pipes in Sandusky are safe.
And Mr. Murray, you and I and Mr. Waddington have sat here long enough to have heard literally the horror stories on the effects of lead. We take that very seriously, and we understand that has so many ramifications to the health of young people, to the development, to the education, the earning power. It is a monster of many arms, and at some point, that's a problem that's going to have to be dealt with. When you're talking about tens of millions of dollars, if you don't like debt, you're sure as heck not going to like fixing that. I can tell you that. Mr. Klein.
Can I add one more thing to that? And we have recently updated our utility health and safety program. I'm sorry about that. But we have recently updated our utility health and safety program where we are funding a portion of water lines and sewer lines. And as part of that, we have put some money towards lead line replacement. If residents are willing to do that and interested in doing that, they can call Elizabeth, and she will coordinate and make sure that it's on the list. So if anybody's interested in replacing their lead line and getting out ahead of this, whenever you want, you can call Elizabeth and work through that.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Klein. Additional comments or questions on this piece of legislation?
Mr. Chairman, I just had a quick question. Mr. Klein, what's the life expectancy on these meters?
Through the chairman, the meters, if I recall, they were a 10 to 15 year life expectancy. And we've been getting more than the normal life out of them with good readings.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Klein. Ms. Myers, you call the roll on that motion, please.
Yes, Mr. President. Mr. Pajali?
Yes.
Mr. Coons?
Yes.
Mr. Crable?
Yes.
Ms. Fargo?
Yes.
Mr. Waddington?
Yes.
Mr. Brady?
Yes.
Mr. Murray?
Yes.
And now on the ordinance.
Mr. Pajali?
Yes.
Mr. Coons?
Yes.
Mr. Crable?
Yes.
Ms. Fargo?
Yes.
Mr. Waddington?
Yes.
Mr. Brady?
Yes.
Mr. Murray?
Yes.
That ordinance is passed. Ms. Myers, will you present item number 1, ordinance number 1 of item number 1, please?
This is the first reading. We request passage of either ordinance 1 or 2. Ordinance 1. It is requested an ordinance be passed affirming the recommendation of the Planning Commission denying the request to amend the official zone map of the City of Sandusky to rezone parcels number 57-03358, 57-02994, 57-02885, 57-02989, and 57-04471, located on Cleveland Road from B160 Single Family Residential District and R2F 2 Family Residential District to RRB Residential Business District.
Commissioners, having heard this ordinance, how do you wish to proceed?
Mr. Chairman.
Commissioner Murray.
I vote for the adoption of ordinance number 11 pursuant to, I vote for the adoption of ordinance number 11.
Second.
And a motion and a second. Discussion. I think we've had a robust discussion earlier. Nothing else to say? Mr. Hastings, I wonder if you'd give us some direction on what a yes vote and what a no vote is on this specific piece
Certainly.
of legislation?
The motion was for the first of the two options that we gave to the commission. The first option was to approve the Planning Commission's denial of the rezoning application. Option two was to overturn the Planning Commission, but the motion was for number one, denying the reversal of the Planning Commission.
And that ordinance requires how many votes for passage?
This one just requires a majority vote.
Just a majority, where the second one would require a
Second one would
supermajority,
require a supermajority
Which
vote
would-
of 6.
which would be 6 of 7 votes.
Correct.
Excellent. Comments or questions, Commissioners?
I have a
Mr.
question.
Crable.
I have a question to the President. I heard in the conversation that this passed at the Planning Commission on a 2-2 vote. The recommendation of the Planning Commission was a 2-2 vote. That there were abstentions, people missing from the meeting, the like. Maybe I've just lived in a bubble, but I don't remember a tie being a passage.
Through the chairman, to Mr. Crable, a tie is not a passage. A tie is a failure.
Then why is it here?
Because they have the right, Mr. Hastings, they have the right to appeal to the city commission, is why they're here.
So they're here by virtue of appeal.
Correct.
But appealing what? Because the zoning board didn't pass
It
anything.
was a denial. The zoning, am I correct, Mr. Hastings, that BZA denied it, so they are
Right.
appealing the denial?
A tie vote is a denial.
A tie vote is a denial.
Yeah, that means the motion does not pass.
Thank you for your patience with me.
Sure. Ms. Myers, will you poll the commission on that motion, please?
Yes, Mr. President. Mr. Bajali?
I abstain.
Mr. Coons?
Yes.
Mr. Crable?
Yes.
Ms. Fargo?
Yes.
Mr. Waddington?
Yes.
Mr. Brady?
Yes.
Mr. Murray?
Yes.
And now on the ordinance.
Mr. Bajali?
No, it was just, there was no emergency piece. It has to come
Okay.
back
It's first reading.
So it's the first reading.
because it's a zoning
Okay.
issue.
Got it. Okay, that is, then to be accurate, that is denied on the first reading, will come back to us at another meeting for a second reading. Ms. Myers, you present item number 2, please.
It is requested an ordinance be passed authorizing and directing the city manager to enter into an agreement with City Architecture Incorporated of Cleveland, Ohio for professional services for the creation of a new strategic plan and declaring that this ordinance shall take immediate effect in accordance with Section 14 of the city charter.
Commissioners, having heard this ordinance, what is your pleasure?
Mr. Chairman,
Commissioner Waddington.
I move for the adoption of this ordinance under suspension of rules in full accordance with Section 14 of the city charter.
Second.
Been a motion and a second discussion. Mr. Orzak, it's been so long ago that the question was asked, I forgot what it was, but your name's on this legislation, so perhaps you remember.
His question was about the public participation as it pertains to whether
Yes.
we're doing meetings or not. So basically, I think, well, Mr. Schwanger and all of you, or a lot of you have been here for what we did back for the bicentennial plan. Back then, they did the strategic plan and the comprehensive plan together, and it was a very robust engagement and participation by the community, more so for the comprehensive plan, which does the land use and all kinds of different activities that we're not doing this time. This is just for our strategic plan, which does for operations and investment in economic development, that is more geared for an internal type of document that more led so by commission and staff. So we have a direction on what they want us to go. So it doesn't involve whether we should make this place a park or that place a park or anything like that. We will have surveys and participation by the community, but it won't be meetings like we had on the boat and at the State Theater and things like that. It's a different, separate process. Strategic plans for about 5 years, the comprehensive plans for 10 to 30. We plan to, planning staff plans to do the comprehensive plan in a couple of years, which will be the robust use of land and things like that,
Back out to the public
Mr.
at that
Schwanger's I'm familiar with. So that's, and I learned about that too, so I understand the confusion.
Thank you, Mr. Orzak. Additional comments or questions on the legislation?
Mr. Chairman, through you to John, as far as the time and for the process, how long does something like the expectation of that going to take?
Yeah, so once we get them under contract, which would be if you guys approve that tonight, the process is going to be 7 to 8 months. They have a timeline and different phases of the project that they'll go through. So about 7 to 8 months from when we kick it off. So sometime, I think this fall, like September, October-ish will be when it'll be done, and we'll be able to start executing it.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Mr. Grable.
Mr. Orzak, I would encourage wherever we can to have public input into this. It's one thing to create a great document and make it available to the public after the fact, but if, to whatever degree we can, engage the public in these kinds of matters, I think it goes a long way toward its acceptance over time.
Additional comments or questions, Commissioner? Ms. Myers, you call the roll on that motion, please.
Yes, Mr. President. Mr. Bajali?
Yes.
Mr. Coons?
Yes.
Mr. Crable?
Yes.
Ms. Fargo?
Yes.
Mr. Waddington?
Yes.
Mr. Brady?
Yes.
Mr. Murray?
Yes.
And now on the ordinance.
Mr. Bajali?
Yes.
Mr. Coons?
Yes.
Mr. Crable?
Yes.
Ms. Fargo?
Yes.
Mr. Waddington?
Yes.
Mr. Brady?
Yes.
Mr. Murray?
Yes.
That ordinance is passed. Ms. Myers, you present item number 3, please.
It is requested a resolution be passed supporting the Ohio Commission for the United States Semi-Quincentennial America 250-OH and declaring that this resolution shall take immediate effect in accordance with Section 14 of the city charter.
Commissioners, having heard this resolution, what is your pleasure?
Mr. Chair,
Commissioner Coons.
move for the adoption of this ordinance under suspension of the rules pursuant to Section 14 of the city charter.
Second.
Been a motion and a second discussion. Ms. Myers, you call the roll on that motion, please.
Yes, Mr. President. Mr. Bajali?
Yes.
Mr. Coons?
Yes.
Mr. Crable?
Yes.
Ms. Fargo?
Yes.
Mr. Waddington?
Yes.
Mr. Brady?
Yes.
Mr. Murray?
Yes.
And now on the resolution.
Mr. Bajali?
Yes.
Mr. Coons?
Yes.
Mr. Crable?
Yes.
Ms. Fargo?
Yes.
Mr. Waddington?
Yes.
Mr. Brady?
Yes.
Mr. Murray?
Yes.
That resolution is passed. Ms. Myers, you present item number 4.
It is requested an ordinance be passed authorizing and directing the city manager to enter into a lease agreement with Pitney Bowes Incorporated of Stamford, Connecticut through the National Association of State Procurement Officials Value Point Cooperative Purchasing Organization for the postage machine equipment and services and declaring that this ordinance shall take immediate effect in accordance with Section 14 of the city charter.
Commissioners, having heard this ordinance, how do you wish to proceed?
Mr. Chairman, I move for the adoption of this ordinance resolution under suspension of the rules in accordance with Section 14 of the city charter.
Second.
Been a motion and a second discussion. Ms. Myers, you call the roll on that motion, please.
Yes, Mr. President. Mr. Bajali?
Yes.
Mr. Coons?
Yes.
Mr. Crable?
Yes.
Ms. Fargo?
Yes.
Mr. Waddington?
Yes.
Mr. Brady?
Yes.
Mr. Murray?
Yes.
And now on the ordinance.
Mr. Pajali?
Yes.
Mr. Coons?
Yes.
Mr. Crable?
Yes.
Ms. Fargo?
Yes.
Mr. Waddington?
Yes.
Mr. Brady?
Yes.
Mr. Murray?
Yes.
That ordinance is passed. Ms. Myers, if you present number 5, please.
It is requested an ordinance be passed amending ordinance number 18-088 passed on April 23, 2018, implementing sections 3735.65 through 3735.70 of the Ohio Revised Code to implement an expanded community reinvestment area in the city of Sandusky, Ohio, and related matters, and declaring that this ordinance shall take immediate effect in accordance with Section 14 of the city charter.
Commissioners, having heard this ordinance, what is your pleasure?
Chairman,
Commissioner Murray.
move for the adoption of this ordinance pursuant to Section 14 of the city's charter.
Second.
Been a motion and a second discussion.
Just to, Mr. Chairman,
Murray.
just to briefly explain, this was the legislation we passed back in 2018, expanding the area where the essentially automatic tax abatement was on homes that were improved to a certain extent. The legislation that we passed back then, unbeknownst to us, was inconsistent with state law, and this brings that into unfold, basically, the legislation said you had to apply for that within the first 12 months. State law provides otherwise, and this is necessary to make our rules consistent with state rules.
Good explanation, Ms. Eversole. Is Mr. Murray correct?
He's correct.
Thank you. Additional comments or questions, Commissioner?
Better than with you.
Ms. Myers, you call the roll on that motion, please.
Yes, Mr. President. Mr. Bajali?
Yes.
Mr. Coons?
Yes.
Mr. Crable?
Yes.
Ms. Vargo?
Yes.
Mr.
Yes.
Waddington? Mr. Brady?
Yes.
Mr. Murray?
Yes.
And now on the ordinance.
Mr. Bajali?
Yes.
Mr. Coons?
Yes.
Mr. Crable?
Yes.
Ms. Fargo?
Yes.
Yes.
Mr. Waddington? Mr. Brady?
Yes.
Mr. Murray?
Yes.
That ordinance is passed. Mr. Waddington, I know that the time is wasting, but you are going to speed us up. I know that.
I was going to have 2 cold ones when I get home. I think it's going to be 4 now.
We have time for one.
Well, one of you got to call my wife and tell her where I'm at. She doesn't believe this, I know that.
Doesn't care.
That is mine.
Back to business, back to business. Ms. Myers, you present item number 6, please.
Yes, Mr. President, it is requested a resolution be passed declaring the necessity for the city to proceed with the proposed Sandusky Wheels Park project, approving the specifications and engineer's estimate of costs thereof, and directing the city manager to advertise for and receive bids in relation thereto, and declaring that this resolution shall take immediate effect in accordance with Section 14 of the city charter.
Commissioners, having heard this resolution, what is your pleasure?
Mr. Chairman,
Commissioner
I move
Waddington.
for the adoption of this resolution under suspension of the rules in full accordance with Section 14 City Charter.
Second.
Been a motion and a second discussion.
Chairman,
Mr. Murray.
I think this is a great project. Is this something we need? No, not necessarily, but parks aren't things that we necessarily need. This project in particular is great. The mother who spoke said it so well, I can't add to what she said. But the primary reasons to do this is we bemoan the fact that kids are sitting in front of computers all the time and they're not engaging with other people, they're not getting physical activity. This does all those things. It gets kids out, it gets them talking with each other, it gets away from the computers, keeps them out of trouble, and becomes just a wonderful opportunity for kids of all ages, all backgrounds, and visitors to our community. So I'm glad to see us take this up.
Additional comments, Commissioners? I agree with Mr. Murray's analysis. I have to tell you, I was not a strong supporter of spending almost $850,000 on a bunch of cement for kids on skateboards. But I came to the conclusion very quickly that if this park keeps one kid off the street or keeps one kid out of trouble, it's worth every bit of that. Additional comments? Ms. Myers, you call a roll on that motion, please.
Yes, Mr. President. Mr. Bajali?
Yes.
Mr. Coons?
Yes.
Mr. Crable?
Yes.
Ms. Fargo?
Yes.
Mr. Waddington?
Yes.
Mr. Brady?
Yes.
Mr. Murray?
Yes.
And now on the resolution.
Mr. Bajali?
Yes.
Mr. Coons?
Yes.
Mr. Crable?
Yes.
Ms. Fargo?
Yes.
Mr. Waddington? Mr. Brady?
Yes,
Mr. Murray?
Yes.
that resolution is passed. Ms. Myers, you present item number 7, please.
It is requested an ordinance be passed authorizing and directing the city manager to enter into a transportation contract for adult daycare between the City of Sandusky and Erie County Health Department, and declaring that this ordinance shall take immediate effect in accordance with Section 14 of the city charter.
Commissioners, having heard this ordinance, what is your pleasure?
Mr. Chairman,
Commissioner Waddington. Or Commissioner Pajali.
I would move to adopt this ordinance in accordance with Section 14 of the city charter.
Second.
Been a motion and a second discussion.
Just a quick question of
Mr.
whoever, through the president, to whoever wants to answer. The 450 rate, just out of curiosity, is this just a negotiated rate? Is this a rate that is based on actual cost?
Mr. Stacy, you probably have that answer.
Yes, through the chair to the commissioner, it is a rate that is designed on a collection of variable costs, including operating costs, fuel, tires, operational hours, and miles.
And Mr. Stacy, that is a per mile cost. It's
Correct.
not-
It
it's
is.
not
Per
a
loaded
450
mile.
rate.
It is per.
And, good, Mr. Crable, does that answer satisfy you?
Perfect.
The way I see that is you have just, by negotiating this, you've just added $125,000 to the coffers. And I know there's some costs that get backed out of there, but it still ends up being a plus number. And thank you for doing that.
Yeah.
I'm hoping you can do it about 10 more times.
Working hard on it.
Mr. Chairman,
Commissioner Jolly.
I would just echo your comments. I was going to mention that at least these buses are generating some income where maybe they would have been parked. And the other thing is it's another example of us working with the county health department and the county, and we're kind of reaching out, and this isn't the first time, so I appreciate the fact that you were willing to put something together.
If I might interject, Mr. President, it makes them more efficient.
It does.
Because they can
Absorbs
layer
cost.
different things. Yeah, yep.
Additional comments? Ms. Myers, you call a roll on that motion, please.
Yes, Mr. President. Mr. Bajali?
Yes.
Mr. Coons?
Yes.
Mr. Crable?
Yes.
Ms. Fargo?
Yes.
Mr. Waddington?
Yes.
Mr. Brady?
Yes.
Mr. Murray?
Yes.
And now on the ordinance.
Mr. Bajali?
Yes.
Mr. Coons?
Yes.
Mr. Crable? Ms. Fargo?
Yes.
Mr. Waddington? Mr. Brady?
Yes.
Mr. Murray?
Yes.
That ordinance is passed. Ms. Myers, you present our last item, item number 8.
It is requested an ordinance be passed authorizing and directing the city manager to enter into an agreement with Progressive Cleaning Solutions Incorporated of Sandusky, Ohio, for cleaning services at the Mills School facility currently used for Sandusky Recreation located at 1918 Mill Street, and declaring that this ordinance shall take immediate effect in accordance with Section 14 of the city charter.
Commissioners, having heard this ordinance, how do you wish to proceed?
Mr. Chair,
Mr. Coons.
move for adoption of the ordinance under suspension of the rules as contained in Section 14 of the city.
Second.
Second.
Been a motion and a second. Discussion. Ms. Myers, you call a roll on that motion, please.
Yes, Mr. President. Mr. Bajali?
Yes.
Mr. Coons?
Yes.
Mr. Crable?
Yes.
Ms. Fargo?
Yes.
Mr. Waddington?
Yes.
Mr. Brady?
Yes.
Mr. Murray?
Yes.
And now on the ordinance.
Mr. Bajali?
Yes.
Mr. Coons?
Yes.
Mr. Crable?
Yes.
Ms. Fargo?
Yes.
Mr. Waddington?
Yes.
Mr. Brady?
Yes.
Mr. Murray?
Yes.
That ordinance is passed. Concludes our regular agenda. We'll turn to our city manager for his report.
Good evening, Commissioner, audience, and staff. I'll try not to talk as fast as Whoopser did that one time, but I'll try to get this through this quick. Kyle Grothwald donated new fitness equipment to the Sandusky Police Department for approximately $19,500. The new equipment was donated in honor of his father, grandfather, and uncle, who were all previously served our community in the police department. I want to thank Kyle for the generous donation of fitness equipment, and I know our officers are already using it well. So if I get a motion to accept that donation.
So moved.
Second.
Been a motion and a second. Discussion. Without objection, that motion will be approved, and hearing no objection, that motion is approved with our thanks to Mr. Grothwald.
The city would like to accept the construction that was completed by the Health Department, another good project that they helped us with, for the southbound right turn lane on Superior Street on the approach to West Monroe. This project was done to better accommodate and reduce backups for traffic exiting Superior Street, which is generated by the County Health Department facility. All work was done to city specification. It was paid for by the Erie County Health Department. If we get a motion to accept that donation.
So moved.
Been a motion and a second. Discussion. Without objection, motion will be approved, and hearing no objection, again with our thanks.
It was about $100,000, by the way. The Division of Parks and Recreation would like to thank Construction Equipment and Supply for lending the city their lifts for use in taking down the Christmas lights. The value of the rental was $1,400. Get a motion to accept that donation.
So moved.
Second.
Been a motion and a second. Discussion. Without objection, that motion will be approved, and hearing no objection, that motion is approved with our thanks for the $1,400 donation.
Next things are for code. There's annual notifications that we have to make to the Sandusky Register, just for the new commissioners' knowledge. The annual notification has been published to comply with Section 53108 of the Codified Ordinances of Sandusky. The ordinance requires the owner or occupant having the care of any lot or land within the city to cut down and remove all noxious weeds and grass of a height of 8 inches or more. Properties found in violation will be served with a written notice posted on the property. Failure to comply within 5 days from the date of the notice will result in the city causing such weeds and grass to be cut and removed. Such cutting and removing shall be at the owner's expense. Voluntary cooperation by all property owners is appreciated. The second one is a notification to comply with Section 95515 of the Codified Ordinances of Sandusky. Containers within which solid waste, garbage, refuse, and/or other discarded materials or recyclables have been deposited may be placed upon a curb for curbside collection no earlier than 6 p.m. from April 1st through September 30th, and no earlier than 4 p.m. from October 1st through March 31st of the evening prior to the scheduled collection of said material. Any material where containers which remain after said collection shall be removed from said curb no later than 8 p.m. on the date of any collection. Finance Committee meeting will be on February 16th at 8 a.m. at City Hall. The city of Sandusky and all of us are proud of our Finance A-team. They received an award for the Certificate of Achievement for Excellence in Financial Reporting by the Government Financial Officers Association of the United States and Canada, GFOA, at its 2022 Annual Comprehensive Financial Report. Certificate of Achievement is the highest form of recognition in governmental accounting and financial reporting, and its attainment represents a significant accomplishment by a government and its management, according to GFOA. Public Works, the construction on East Water Street is underway and is expected to last 4 months. Please use caution when driving in the area. Pedestrians and cyclists should use sidewalks when available and no longer use the temporary bike path that was previously designated with delineators along the north pavement. The outfall project on Monroe Street near Mills Creek is complete, minus boulevard grass restoration. For community development, a survey is open to the public until March 1st to gather community input for the Community Development Block Grant Program's Consolidated Plan. The plan serves as a long-range guide for the program for the next 5 years. The survey can be accessed on the city's website, Facebook page, or paper copies can be obtained at City Hall. CDBG public service applications will be open for eligible nonprofits on February 12th and will be available on the city's website and by request. The cap for this program is $25,000 per agency. The deadline for submission is March 14th. You can call 627-5738 for more information. And the Housing Development and Beautification Program opened on Monday, February 5th, 2024. Applications can be submitted via email, mail, or Dropbox in the lobby. If you are interested in participating in the program, visit www.cityofsandusky.com/housing to obtain an application or pick one up in the lobby. If you're unable to do so, you can call 419-627-5832. We have about 52 applications thus far since the program opened. That concludes my remarks. Happy to answer any questions.
Comments or questions for the city manager?
Chairman,
Commissioner Murray.
only one. We should take a moment to note that we are fortunate in the city of Sandusky to have a long history of excellent accounting. It's not true in every city. And Michelle Reeder and her team do an excellent job, and I am thankful for it, and I think the community should know what an excellent job you do year in, year out. So thank you.
Thank you.
Agreed. Thank you. Additional comments for the city manager? Items of old business, commissioners. Do any of you have any items of old business to discuss? If not, items of new business. I have one, and that would be I am asking for a motion to nominate former Commissioner Blake Harris to serve on our Board of Zoning Appeals Committee. We have a vacancy.
So moved.
There.
Second.
Got a motion and a second discussion. Ms. Myers, you poll the commission on that motion.
Yes, Mr. President. Mr. Bajali?
Yes.
Mr. Coons?
Yes.
Mr. Crable?
Yes.
Ms. Vargo?
Yes.
Mr. Waddington?
Yes.
Mr. Brady?
Yes,
Mr. Murray?
Yes.
that motion is passed, and Mr. Harris is back in our employ, so to speak. Additional items of new business. Mr. Waddington.
Yeah, an item that has haunted the city and several of the commissioners in the past decades is repair of sidewalks. This list continues to grow, and I would like to make a motion to approve expenditure from the American Rescue Funds of $960,000 to repair all of the city sidewalks on our current repair list compiled by our Public Works. I would include in this motion that stipulation that going forward from today, the city no longer bears the cost of sidewalks repairs unless repair is due to the city-owned tree damage in the sidewalk. From this day forward, sidewalk repairs are the responsibility of the owner of the property.
Second.
Been a motion and a second discussion.
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Murray.
We've talked about this for years. We used to have a sidewalk commissioner who would go around and say to the individual property owners, you got to fix your sidewalk, and it was always the homeowners or the property owner's responsibility. We didn't have a sidewalk commissioner for a lot of years, and so it's going to be necessary that someone be designated to fulfill, not a full-time job, but fulfill that role. We got into the business of getting back up to speed. We've made a lot of progress. We've put down a lot of sidewalks, but I think it is time to close this program so that we're not saddling future commissions with these costs. We have looked at the possibility of doing In past years, we've looked at this for many years, so that's really getting to be too much. We got to stop at some point. This is the time to stop. We've looked at doing a 50-50 basis, but the paperwork required for that, it makes it just as much work for the city as it would be to fully fund it, so it's really not a viable option to do it on a 50-50 basis.
I think it's an excellent motion. I certainly am supportive of it. It gets us into literally every neighborhood throughout the city benefits from that. The only thing I would ask Mr. Waddington, if you would consider amending your motion to drive the funds from CDGB money as opposed to the ARPA dollars, which we have pretty much committed throughout. Is that not correct, Ms. Reed?
No. Is it CDBG money?
It's ARPA.
Is it ARPA funds?
Yeah.
You need to set a hearing for CDBG.
It has to be used up, yeah.
I got it. Okay, I got the wrong message.
We want-
ARPA funds are okay then.
Yeah, you had to set the meeting tonight, so I didn't want you to say, let's everybody get out of here.
You're supposed to give me those notes, notes before the meeting instead of after the meeting.
Mr. Chairman, I checked with the boss here.
Yeah, you're ahead of me.
Okay.
Once again, you're ahead of me.
Hey, I would like to add, though, you went with me, probably 6-7 years ago. I think maybe Mr. Murray come out to a few of the neighborhoods, and we did a lot, I think about to the tune of about 475, and we still didn't hit all of them. And I think this is a good position to catch up, and then.
I think we want to be clear, and perhaps you were clear, that we're drawing a line starting really yesterday.
Yeah.
And we're not going to continue the program of 100% or any percent. But with that caveat, that if our trees are pushing streets up out of the ground, that's still going to be our responsibility. I think that.
That's clear.
That
That's
is
clear
your
in the
motion.
motion. Yep.
Great. We have a motion and a second. I'll ask Ms. Byers to.
Mr. Crable has a.
Mr. Crable, question.
Just a quick observation. I like this because it hits basically every neighborhood in town.
Every neighborhood.
I can't tell you how many times I've either broken or nearly broken a toe on, an offset piece of concrete. So I like it in that regard. I did not know this was coming up tonight. I had heard rumors that it might be coming up soon, but I think it's a great idea. I don't, I'm supportive of it. It's
great.
Yeah.
Join me at the House of Donuts, you get a lot of information.
And a donut.
And a donut.
Ms. Byers, you call a roll on that motion, please.
Donut.
Yes, Mr. President. Mr. Bajali?
Yes.
Mr. Coons?
Yes.
Mr. Crable?
Yes.
Ms. Fargo?
Yes.
Mr. Waddington?
Yes.
Mr. Brady?
Yes.
Mr. Murray?
Yes.
That motion is passed, and those funds can now be appropriated. Any additional items of new business, Commissioners?
Mr. Chair,
Mr. Coons.
quickly, because I had a conversation about this regarding Orlando Pace Park. And I remember saying that I had reached out to a former exec, retired, and he actually made a call and sent a text, sent me the information, and I reached out to Mr. Waddington, and I told him I was inspired to, get in the neighborhood and do a little cleanup. So I'm going to be reaching out to residents over there at Sunnyside whenever the railroad decides that they're going to do their part, work alongside our folks so we can do a little of our own part. And I'll be out there, so I'm going to put that word out for residents. And I called Mr. Waddington about that.
He can join us this summer then with Mr. Bajali.
Yeah.
Mr. Coons, if you're partnering with Mr. Waddington, you will have some stories to tell.
Sure.
Excellent. Thank you for doing that. No additional items of new business? Under new business, I need to I've got the message now from two people. I need to set a public hearing for CDGB. For which meeting, Ms. Byers?
It's on your note there. Mr. President, note.
I'd like to find that somewhere.
April.
An April meeting?
Yes.
Somebody? Oh, well, that's why I can't find it. It's under my W-2. April, I need a motion to set a hearing for CDGB money on April the 8th.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second discussion. Ms. Byers, you poll the commission on that motion, please.
Yes, Mr. President. Mr. Bajali?
Yes.
Mr. Coons? Mr. Crable?
Yes.
Ms. Fargo?
Yes.
Mr. Waddington?
Yes.
Mr. Brady?
Yes.
Mr. Murray?
Yes.
That motion passes. I need an additional motion, Commissioners, to move the city commission meeting from Eclipse Day on April 8th to April the 9th. May I have a motion to make that movement?
So moved.
Second.
Been a motion and a second discussion.
Chicken.
Ms. Myers, you call the roll on the motion, please.
Mr. Bajali?
Yes.
Mr. Coons?
Yes.
Mr. Crable?
Yeah.
Ms. Fargo?
Yes.
Mr. Waddington?
Yes.
Mr. Brady?
Yes.
Mr. Murray?
No.
Does that include the public?
Obviously has the courage of his conviction. That's rare, isn't it? That motion passes.
Mr. President, if I may, does that include the public hearing that we just
Yeah,
set
I
for
was
the
going to
8th?
ask that.
Oh, yes.
End up moving the public hearing to the following day. Do you need
I would recommend that.
need to do another motion to do that?
We could have,
Just do it. No, we don't have to.
Yeah.
yeah.
We'll do a motion to move that CDGB hearing to April the 9th.
So moved.
That motion and a second. Ms. Myers, call the roll on that motion, please.
Mr. Bajali?
Yes.
Mr. Coons?
Yes.
Mr. Crable?
Yes.
Ms. Fargo?
Yes.
Mr. Waddington? Mr. Brady?
Yes,
Mr. Murray?
Yes.
that motion is now passed. Public comments on anything that pertains to city business.
Yeah, I know we're all getting kind of punch heavy here, but Tim Schwanger, 362 Sheffield Way. Just a couple real quick. I had 12, but I'll narrow it down to 3. Okay?
Thank you.
That's good.
On the skate park, Wheels Park back here, let's make sure if we can that there's some shade structures that are included in that plan, please. Also, to the new commissioners, it might be appreciative if for all of us back here, if you would use your mics, kind of close up. Appreciate that. Also, for the new commissioners, I'll take you back 15 years ago. We did the Lions Park study plan, and that project is still not complete. If there is some American Rescue Plan funds available, maybe we can do something with the shoreline there as far as a wading beach. We've been waiting a long time for that, and if there's money available elsewhere besides the city budget, maybe we can use that for that project. One item that did not appear in the city manager's report, probably an oversight, or maybe he hadn't gotten the information on this yet. We did receive a $1 million grant from the state of Ohio for Battery Park, and I did not know if he wanted to mention what specifically that was for tonight, or if he can maybe put it in a future city manager's report, what that $1 million is going to be used for. Also, under the Housing Development and Beautification Grant Program, this was brought up under City Commissioner Waddington's Coffee with Commissioners. You saw tonight where we already have 52 applicants for $400,000, okay? Last year, I think the commission added another $100,000 from whatever fund. I would suggest that you highly look into adding additional funds again this year to, obviously we have $1.2 million available for business grants, but we need to do more for the neighborhoods. And a lot of these people that are coming before the Housing Board of Appeals, they don't have the money to put a $13,000 roof on their house. And the city is limiting them to $3,000 as a grant. We need to hop that percentage up for the homeowners. That's it. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Mr. Schwager. Mr. Crable, I'm going to give you the floor. We've had a discussion regarding your desire to speak at this portion of the meeting, and I welcome you.
Thank you, Mr. President. Obviously, it's been fairly obvious to anyone who attends these meetings on a regular basis that I haven't been here. It certainly hasn't been for lack of interest or desire to be here. The simple answer, and I can go into any specifics that anybody wants to ask me about later. I won't leave the room immediately, but I have a terminal cancer. And it's a cancer that we don't really know the prognosis. In other words, we don't know the date. Okay, it will be coming sometime. It will likely result from a failure of my liver. But in the meantime, we're trying to treat it to, make me able to come to these meetings. So I just wanted to be able to share that with everyone. Secondly, I wanted to sincerely thank staff and commission, because the commission knows about this. The kindnesses that have been extended to me mean everything. So we're just going to have to play it by ear and see where it goes and how long it lasts. And I'm going to keep kicking as long as I can. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Crable. I think you understand and know that you have the support of this entire commission.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Murray.
Mr. Crable and I were opponents many years ago on a race that most people have forgotten at this point.
Probably just as well.
I can tell you, he's one hell of a fighter, and this disease has its work to do, because I think he's going to beat it.
Mr. Chair?
From your lips to God's ears.
That gave me fuel for the fire, right? We haven't always been on the same side, but we've fought some good battles together. And this is a battle.
Yes, it is.
I'm with you.
I understand that, buddy.
To be continued, more to come.
Yes, sir.
I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
We're adjourned.
Thank you.